We're here in the Science Museum in central London. Lots of families have come in, XR families, there's XR grandparents, XR scientists, XR doctors inside the museum, calling for the museum to not have fossil-based companies funding their exhibitions.
Has spoken, is broken, be broken, get shut,
That's media coverage.
The baby has spoken, is awful, be broken, get shut, get shut, get shut, the animals have spoken, is awful, be broken, get shut, get shut, get shut. What do we want? Where from? What do we want? Where from? What do we want?
We're here at the Science Museum and we've been here since 1. We've been doing outreach to XR scientists, XR doctors, and a lot of other groups as well, local groups, community groups. We're here to say that we need to stop the harm, and in this case, the way that we're doing it is asking Shell asking the museum to stop taking money from Shell for their exhibitions and other fossil fuel companies. It's greenwashing, and it's also funding an exhibition on climate change funded by a fossil fuel company is beyond hypocritical, and it has to stop. Museums need to be a place of free debate and not infiltrated by corporate interests. That's what we're saying today. And now we're doing a die-in and a procession through the museum. It's supposed to be closed, but we've stayed to show how dissatisfied we are with this national institution that so many people love and so many children gain inspiration from. So I'm going to let you hear some of the chants that are so distinctive to Extinction Rebellion. We've been joined here by, I would say, maybe about a few hundred people, maybe 200 people processing through the Science Museum. We've got children here as well. Families have come, XR families, because they're very concerned, actually, by the Science Museum. Changing the narrative, well, potentially having their narratives influenced by fossil fuel companies, which obviously we do not want.
Let's continue our tour of this beautiful museum. Extinction! Let's carry on marching.
Hey, hey, ho, ho. Sponsoring of Shell has got to go. Okay, maybe it doesn't totally rhyme, but the sentiment is Shell, get out of our national institution, get out of our museum. I want this to be a space where we can discuss the future of humanity. It's so important to have those spaces, and I say that as somebody who works in a museum myself, absolutely horrified that corporate interests like Shell should be able to have a say in how we conduct our debates in museums. Curators, I've seen studies that have said that curators are actually more trusted than a lot of people in society, including politicians. Well, not so much surprise in that one, but we cannot let that trusted institution of the museum be degraded. Just taking a picture of the back of a lab coat here. We've been joined by doctors, we've been joined by scientists, and a lot of people who are not from those professions but are really, really concerned at what's going on in the world generally. I mean, this is one of many protests we've had this week. We're on day 7 of the Impossible Rebellion. And we're asking, or we're demanding for the government to stop the harm that's coming to this planet. And fossil fuels are a huge part of that, and the government is still funding them. They still have a maximum economic returns policy, which means that anybody who's extracting oil from our onshore or offshore oil fields must take out as much as is possible in order to get maximum economic returns from it, maximum economic recovery, and that's mandatory. From the Oil and Gas Authority, which is a government company. How can that be going on in a climate emergency? It's absolutely criminal. So we're calling on the government to immediately stop all investments in new fossil fuels, not new fossil fuel developments. It's a total no-brainer. And we need other public institutions such as the Science Museum to really step up and do the ethical thing and find their funding from other sources. Funding is always going to be a problem in the arts and cultural sector. That doesn't mean that we have to stoop low so as to accept what Extinction Rebellion activists would call dirty money. Accepting a very small gift from Shell, small for the amount of money that profits that they make per year, in order to provide a greenwash, making it seem like, in fact, the Science Museum is, that Shell is, sorry, it's been a very long week. Shell is making themselves look much more environmentally friendly than they are. Hello. Hi, do you work at the museum?
I do, sorry, I don't want to talk.
No? Okay, that's fine. So just talk to somebody at the museum doesn't want to talk to me. That's absolutely fine. Very difficult. We obviously don't want to put museum employees in a difficult position, whether or not they support us. So yes, not surprising that they don't want to talk. But they have been very accommodating to us at the museum today as we've been going around. And yeah, many thanks to them for allowing us to have this protest and not making it difficult for us to have these conversations with the public. So just to remind anybody who's just joining us, this is the second part of our live stream for today, on the 7th day of the Impossible Rebellion. And we are inside the Science Museum. We've been inside the Science Museum for a number of hours now. And we're going to be around now, everybody who's been sprinkled around doing outreach with the public. And we are going to try, and if my internet holds up, I'm going to try and hear a few more chants and speeches now.
What the hell doing here anyway? Keep it in the ground, keep it in the ground. Keep it in the ground, we gotta keep it in the ground. Keep it in the ground, we gotta keep it in the ground. We gotta keep it in the ground, we gotta keep it in the ground.
Hi, we're here today outside the Science Museum where we're with XR families, Extinction Rebellion scientists, different groups who have come together to call on the Science Museum to act now in the face of the climate and ecological emergency. The Science Museum is an institution which celebrates some of the greatest scientific minds in our history, and yet they are still sponsored by Shell, a company which is destroying the planet and as a result of that contributing to the murder of billions of people. And it's absolutely abhorrent that the Science Museum is still accepting sponsorship from them. Now, this action is just one action in a wider 2 weeks of Extinction Rebellion's Impossible Rebellion. We're currently right in the middle of that. The week that we've just had has been focused around crisis talks. So we've been inviting the community to come to the table, to take their seat at the table, to explore what a radical change in democracy might look like, and to imagine what the world could be if we were to do the impossible and to change and do what needs to be done. What we're also going to be doing this rebellion is focusing on the City of London, and we're going to be demanding that the government ends all new fossil fuel investments immediately. Now, this is something that needs to be done. Now, we've got a government that keeps going on and on and on about the fact that it's doing so great and it's so green and it's taking great steps forward, but we're demanding that they put their money where their mouth is. We're demanding that they stop all new fossil fuel investments right now, not in 20 years' time, but right now.
Well, welcome back to the outside of the Science Museum. I'm standing here admiring this absolutely magnificent pink dodo, which was delivered quite triumphantly earlier in the day to great cheers from the crowd. To me, it symbolizes the attitude of the Science Museum. It's an extinct attitude, allowing fossil fuel companies to have a platform within their museums and for them to accept funding, as you've heard from many speakers today. So I won't go on about it, but I just thought this really was a great feature today for people to bring along and for us to have a little bit of a think about what that symbolizes. We've heard a number of speeches while you've been away. We've heard from sort of fact-based professionals like doctors and scientists. We've heard from a gentleman from Nigeria who was talking about the devastation that Shell has caused to his country and asking for our support in trying to help to stop Shell doing oil exploration. And also we've had some speakers that were speaking about the need for imagination and the need for a sense of longing for a new type of world, and for all of us to be able to feel that, so that we're looking at decarbonization not as something where we're going to miss a lot of things that we enjoy, but as a real opportunity to create the society of equality and opportunity for all that we would all like to see. It's winding down a little bit here. We've had the children's play area. They've been making stencils here and doing a hopscotch showing all of the different aspects of harmful activities, human activities that contribute to climate change. And also we have some sort of unique games going on that the older children can play here, putting together a giant wooden puzzle, etc. It's all winding down a bit now here, though. They're still speaking, but
Star Trek's a good one. Star Trek imagines a future where
I'm a bit lost for words, really, because the speaker is quite loud. It's hard to hear myself.
human beings.
We still have the tables here with all of our.
And what I just wanted to leave you guys with today is the idea that sometimes people.
Yep, I'll take you to the speaker.
Sci-fi, or you're into fantasy and all that kind of things. That it's escapist nonsense, and you need to be focusing on the here and now. But the reality is that the only way we get to the future is to start imagining it and start dreaming about it. Yes, woo, yeah. And I think when you start imagining the kind of positive futures that you want to work towards, that's when we start to think about the kind of ideas that normalize those circumstances and can eventually lead to them becoming a reality. So if there are any writers amongst you out there, or any people who like dreaming up the futures, I challenge you, when you think of your next sci-fi novel set in space, or you want to escape into those kinds of fantasies, how about start seeking out the ones that have imagined the impossible, like we are doing here today, and are actually imagining the kind of futures that all the previous amazing speakers have been talking about so fantastically. Yeah, so thanks so much for listening to my little speech, guys. I hope you have a fantastic rest of the day. Live long and prosper.
By air pollution from combusting fossil fuels, which is an insane statistic, isn't it? And when I see these kinds of exhibits, which, you know, have good technology, but as Charlie was saying, they're a long way away, and what we need to do is to stop putting carbon dioxide into the atmosphere in the first place. So I'm going to cut here, and I hope that the children here can lead the Extinction Rebellion chant. Can you guys say extinction? Can you say extinction?
Thank you, everybody. And now we are going to march the procession back through the museum to the front entrance where we started. So if you follow the pink banner.
Excuse me, Charlie.
Yes.
I totally missed your speech on the live stream.
All right.
We're live now. Would you mind saying a few words as we're walking?
Of course. I mean,
Yeah, sorry, UK live stream. Allowed to by the chanting. Sure, okay. Yeah, let's let people move off, and then just to
in the ground, so keep it in the ground. In the ground, so keep it in the ground. Keep it in the ground, so keep it in the ground.
It's just a reminder, we're at the Science Museum here, and it's after closing time. And I've joined a procession through the Science Museum and now leaving it. And we've had some speeches from some of the scientists and doctors who've been here doing outreach all the day, giving out leaflets, talking to people about about climate change as they've been having their day out. And we're going to move back to the entrance of the museum. There's lots going outside the museum as well, and we'll bring you some footage from there very soon. I've just collared Dr. Charlie Gardner because he did a great speech back there, but we missed it on the live stream because of some tech issues. So I don't want to ask you to do your whole speech again, but would you be able to tell me the main reason why XR scientists are here today?
So we're here really to protest against sponsorship of this Our Future Planet exhibition at the Science Museum by Shell, who are of course a major fossil fuel corporation. Now, as a scientist, the reason I'm personally here, there must be 15, 20, 30 different reasons why Shell shouldn't be sponsoring an exhibition at the Science Museum. For me, the most compelling one is that the fossil fuel industries have an explicitly anti-science agenda. The Science Museum is a great scientific institution, yet it's taking money from an industry that has spent the last 30 years or more systematically trying to reduce public faith in science. The reason why there are people that don't think climate change is happening, the reason why there are people that know that it's happening but don't think it's important, is because of a systematic misinformation campaign by Shell and others who have funded think tanks like Global Warming Policy Foundation and others. You know, the media messaging that is suggesting that we don't need to take emergency action on climate is funded by the fossil fuel industry. So it's just deeply wrong that a great scientific institution should be in bed with an organization that has, or with an industry that has an explicitly anti-science agenda. More specifically, Shell sponsored this exhibition over there on the other side of the hall, which is called Our Future Planet. And this exhibition is entirely about how technology will save us from climate change. They focus on carbon capture and storage. And, you know, the Science Museum is simply not telling the truth here. It is not telling the truth. It is strongly implying that the answer to the climate crisis is to suck carbon out of the atmosphere at some unstated future date with some as yet non-existent magical technologies. Nowhere in this exhibition does it say that the answer is quite simply to not put that carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases there in the first place. So we're here at the Science Museum. We will be here all night, and yeah, hope to see more of you later. Enjoy your evening.
Couldn't have put it better myself. Thank you very much, Dr. Charlie Gardner. Great to have the perspective of one of our XR spokespeople for this action. I'm going to walk at a pace now as we move our way back towards the front and see what's happening next. I wonder if there's anything outside as I jog up to catch up with the procession that we can look at.
The kind of grub. They went into a chrysalis and they came out as a very ugly black butterfly. Maybe one that would have been home in the underworld that I was in a little bit earlier. And they've had a few new recruits. Sorry, I'm just having a scan to see what I can cut. So the people that the Global Warming Policy Foundation work for are terrified of the government's lame-ass net zero 2050 target. They are scared because not only are we the 6th biggest economy in the world, and we're also, the UK is heading up COP, but also because in Britain lies the City of London, where a lot of oil companies get their funding. The new recruit to the Global Warming Policy Foundation is a bad news person called Steve Baker. Steve Baker is the self-confessed hard man of Brexit. Can you remember what the Houses of Parliament were like and what the news was like while the Brexit stuff was going on? This man set himself up against Theresa May's plans for a soft Brexit. This man is terrible news for us and for the climate issue. He has threatened Boris Johnson with a political explosion if he goes ahead with his carbon net zero plans. A political explosion. I don't know about you, but that sounds a bit like Trump to me. And they're getting traction. A couple of weeks ago, in 2 weeks, there were 12 articles in the Telegraph, 2 articles in the Sun, and articles in the Express, the Times, the Mail, the Sunday papers, and the Spectator, all talking about the impossibility of getting to carbon net zero. Before the parliamentary recess, the Cabinet had a meeting and they were discussing boilers and how to transition to carbon net zero. We don't know who the global warming policy people.
So we're here on the Cornwall Road junction and we have a bamboo structure. So this is the junction of Cornwall Road. The van here. Looks like there's a level on the top of that. We've got spanners out inside here. Anyone up for talking to camera? So Extinction Rebellion have a bamboo structure in the middle of the road. Looks like several protesters have been arrested before it got fully erected. Just going to head over here and see what's going on over here. We've got some. Okay, so let's see what's going on inside the Science Museum. Okay, so they're just clearing for an ambulance to come through, so very quick clearance off the road in order for an ambulance to come down should it need to. It's being waved through now. Yeah. Woo. Oh, okay, I'm going to stay out the way. So, the bamboo structure didn't quite make it up. So it's got a clear run through. The ambulance is able to get through. People very quickly cleared the road. We're just outside the Science Museum. It's on Cromwell Road, on the junction with Exhibition Road. Some banners blocking the road here. There's a banner blockade here, large truck here, and I can see one rebel on the top of the roof of the truck. The actions today have been outside and inside the Science Museum because it has Shell funding. I think it's a climate exhibition. It's the call is to stop taking fossil fuel funding for the arts and education, and to stop investing in all new fossil fuels. Very simple ask, which Extinction Rebellion are calling for during this rebellion. It's a 2-week-long rebellion, about a week into it now. It's exhausting. They are doing actions every day, and it's not just one action a day. Sometimes it's been like 4 actions in a day. Just going to see if protest over here is up for doing an interview. Excuse me, are you up for talking to camera at all? Are you up for talking to camera? Sure.
That's away from me, please. That's loads of space we can work.
Okay. So let's go and see what else is going on inside the Science Museum. Over to you inside.
Yeah, so we're back at inside the Science Museum. As you saw, just went through all galleries on the ground floor down to the Our Future Planet exhibition, which is the one that we're worried about, Shell sponsoring, come all the way back. And in true XR style, we are having a die-in right in the middle of the energy hall, which is the bottom floor of this very long and tall institution. So beloved by the British public, and as you can see, we're letting visitors exit from the galleries along the ramp while we take a stand. And I would say we've got about 300 people here, between 200 and 300 people staging this die-in. As you can see, quite a few people near me in their scrubs, members of XR doctors, and representing all the healthcare profession, all the healthcare professions, I should say, many of them, XR scientists as well, dying in, taking a stand for the planet, and standing up against fossil fuel investment in the arts and culture sector. Let's see who else we've got on this die-in. Can get a little look at some of the banners here. There's lots of children here as well with their families. Obviously, the Science Museum is somewhere where lots of families like to come, especially in the summer holidays. We're trying to be as visible as possible, and that's why we had all of our outreach this afternoon outside, activities for children and families to do together and to respond to the climate emergency. And also we've had crisis talks. So asking people to come and engage with us about the climate crisis, talk about what worries them, find out more from the scientists. We've got one protester on the floor here with her vest saying it's a code red. That refers to the Code Red for Humanity issued by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change only a couple of weeks ago now, I believe, saying that it really has got, the scientists have gone away and they've debated, and the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is known to be very conservative. There's thousands of scientists working together to try and come to consensus as to where we are on climate change, and it's bad. It's really bad. We are going to reach the 1.5 degree so-called safe limit above pre-industrial levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Within 20 years, that's going to happen. That's going to have huge repercussions for all of us, but particularly the young people and children who are here today. And we've got a lot of grandparents and parents who, that's when people say, when we ask people, why are you doing this? Of course, the most common reason people say is they're worried for their children, their grandchildren, and in some cases, for younger people, for children that they'll never be able to have, or they'll never want to have, because they'll bring them into a world where we might have extreme famines across the world from crop failures as the climate warms and becomes wetter in a lot of areas and not very not great for agriculture. We're seeing catastrophic flooding. We've seen it in Germany with over 200 people dead, and that might not actually be the final count. We've seen floods, really bad floods in China this year as well. And of course, we had the Chinese action that you probably saw on our earlier live stream. And wildfires all over the world, temperatures soaring in Siberia to +30. I mean, this is just the beginning. So that's why we're here. I don't want to labor the point, but that is why we are here. We're saying Science Museum, you've got to really look at the scientists, look at the science, step up. And yes, we want to have a debate in the museum. We want to have exhibitions, but we cannot be letting fossil fuel companies call the shots on those exhibitions. They are hugely culpable for ecocide, which means crimes against the environment, and also crimes against communities in which these extractive projects are taking place. I can hear some drums, actually. Yeah, I can hear some drums. So I think the Samba Band is coming to the Science Museum. We're going to cut there and see. I can see them out the window. Let's go.
Hi, so tell us what's going on here, why you've come out today.
Okay, well, we've come to this specific location. It's near the Science Museum. The Science Museum has a partnership with Shell, and we chose this target, this road, because we want to say it's not good enough for our public institutions, our museums, to be that are supposed to be protectors of truth and science, climate science, cozying up to fossil fuel companies that are destroying this planet. And we're taking non-violent direct action by blocking the road, because we believe that's the only tool we have to disrupt business as usual and to cause disruption and to get people to wake up. It's an easy way that people can act, those of us who have the privilege to act and take a road, hold a space and create something beautiful. We've not quite been able to get the structure up, but that's okay. We're here blocking the street, causing disruption. It's a beautiful sight. People are here watching, and we've got people like this wonderful live streamer talking to me now, and yeah, that's why we're here.
So there's 2 weeks of rebellion going on. What would you say to people watching the stream, thinking about they want to do something about the climate emergency?
If they want to do something, please get down to London while you can, if you're able to, if it's safe for you to do so in the pandemic. There's plenty of stuff going on in London. Each of these days, or this coming week, will be targeting the City of London in particular. So you can come and you can say, no, it's not good enough to be financing the fossil fuel industry. Did you know that the City of London, if it were a country, would have the 9th highest carbon footprint because of the money it pumps into the fossil fuel industry? So come and say that's not good enough. We need that money into renewables, into a just transition out of this climate emergency.
Is there anything else you want to add?
Sorry, can you repeat?
Anything else that you'd like to say?
Just that I just turned up today. I've turned up to this rebellion because I want to create change. I'm just an ordinary person like everyone here, and it's just I'm desperate. I don't know what else to do. I don't normally do these kinds of interviews. I'm not a public speaker. I'm not someone who's used to this kind of thing. I've just been doing rebellions as long as I can to try and make change. And it's absolutely wonderful because people are joining us in the street, and the police can't do anything about people power. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, thank you. The Samba Band is arriving.
Currently watching an Extinction Rebellion protest here on Cromwell Road, just outside the Science Museum, and we're asking the people in charge to listen to the science. As you can see, the Samba Band has just come behind me. We've got an amalgamation of plants, grounds. Police are trying to disperse the peaceful protesters. This is a protest, as you can see on the back of that lady, it says non-violent. This has just happened. 5 minutes. Oh, the camera doesn't. Oh no. What's happening? Can you see this? This is a non-violent movement. No one is being violent. But you can see the police are pushing them around. Let's see if we can talk to one of those police officers today. As you can see, what's happening here is what's called a kettle. A kettle is when the police officers are trying to keep the people involved in the action behind lines, police lines. I'm gonna look this way. So they're holding up signs here saying, imagine the impossible. This is all getting, this is very intense now. Let's see if we can talk to anyone. As I mentioned, we're outside the Science Museum. Protesters here are simply asking. She's been pushed over by police. Oh no. So we're not gonna. This girl next to us has been pushed over by police. Her leg is now bleeding. They're shouting, we're not violent, how about you? We're not violent, how about you? Hi, can I ask, do you have anything to say? Do you have anything to say about what they're saying today? What's it saying about climate change? Do you feel safe? I think it says a lot. I was just asking police officer here to comment on what's happening. He's not saying anything. Do you have anything to say at all? No. I think it says a lot when the people that control and support government around us are saying nothing. This is very, very telling. This lady next to me has got blood now leaking down her leg because of being pushed over by the police. And they shoved her to the ground like a dog. These men do not care about human life. We come here to be non-violent, to save our children's future. And they're part of a system that destroys people and doesn't care about human beings. And I am disgusted at this behavior. And what I'm more disgusted about is the climate and ecological emergency that's going to do a hell of a lot worse to her than what the guys have done. If you had a chance to talk to the people who can make a difference and stop this from happening, what would you say? My daughter is going to suffer a lot worse than bleeding knees with the climate crisis that is coming. This should shame everyone in power that we have to come and beg and demand and rebel to save the future. They should be looking after our children. Instead, they're doing that to her, and it's only going to get worse. So step up now and do your duty. Protect our futures. Act now on the climate and ecological emergency. Thank you very much. Thank you.
They threw me down. If that isn't violent, I don't know what is. We are non-violent. We are here in peace. And you oppress us and you commit violence against us. And I hope you can sleep at night knowing what you do to people. I hope you can sleep at night.
Oh, back with me. Okay. Hello, you just heard from one girl here that's just been pushed down by the police. I've asked if she... We've got 2 cameras now. Okay. We're allowed behind this barrier here. We've got people sitting on the ground. These are people who are likely going to be arrested today. They're willing to be arrested for these reasons. Hi. I'm just finding out if there's any interviews. Maybe I could chat to you for a minute. Yeah? Brilliant. Hello, everyone. If you're just tuning in, we are outside the Science Museum asking for the people in power to listen to the science. The science has never been clearer. We are in a code red for this beautiful planet that we're living on. We need change to happen now.
with me, I've got George, who we spoke to yesterday. So you might have seen George yesterday, but if not, hello George. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name's George. I'm basically from London, but I live in Bristol now. I've been here with my 10-month-old until lunchtime today, and he's gone back with his mum. I'm a bit freer now to rebel. And we're here at the Science Museum because companies like Shell continue to buy social license for a giant crime against humanity. Like a crime against humanity on the scale that even Stalin couldn't have imagined. You know, like the worst thing, you know, Hitler, the worst thing that we possibly imagine. Even they didn't devise a means to potentially destroy the entirety of life as we know it. You know, and I don't mean that in any way to belittle the incredible crimes that have gone on in the past. They have been horrific, many of them. But what we're up against is at such an enormous scale that we almost zone out, you know. I know people have heard that Eddie Izzard thing where he talks about how, like, you know, somebody kills one person and they're a murderer and it's terrible, and somebody kills 15 people and they're a mass murderer and that's even worse. And, you know, you get to the millions and the billions that, you know, we can't really process that, and I think this is a big part of why more of us are not taking action. You know, this is not just some fringe scientists, by the way, saying Code Red for Humanity. It is the Intergovernmental Panel of Scientists. So everything that they publish in their summary for policymakers is agreed line by line by governments. And these are governments that don't want to agree to a lot of that, right? The scientists can prevent the governments getting rid of stuff that is clearly, obviously scientific. So when we talk about the IPCC science and the IPBES science, which is just as important, because it's not just climate, it's the rest of nature, talking about science, like I say, that every single government has, somewhat under duress, agreed to. So there is no way out of the predicament we're in other than the necessary action. And because the necessary action we should have been taking 20, 30 years ago wasn't taken, that's why we're in a code red. That's why we see unimaginable catastrophes befalling hundreds of millions of people across the world at the moment. And I might have said this to you on the live stream the other day, but for me, the key statistic we need to share as far and wide as possible is that 92% of the excess carbon emissions in the atmosphere are from the rich countries. So more than 9 out of 10 particles of carbon beyond 350 parts per million, which is what's probably causing this catastrophe, came from the rich countries. So when people are being told that China is the problem, so even if you do care, there's not really any point because, you know, what we do doesn't matter, that is simply not true. The rich countries have to take responsibility for this crisis. And again, you know, in the intergovernmental forums, for the last 25 years, in the UNFCCC process, the COPs that you hear about every year, they've agreed to acting based on historic responsibility and ability to pay. And because the rich countries still have 60%, well, less than 10% of the world's population, 60% of the world's wealth, right? So the cause of this crisis is the rich countries. The source of the funds primarily to address it is the rich countries. And unless the rich countries do everything they are meant to, then the same PR companies that are working for companies in the rich countries and the poor countries are going to go around going around the world doing what they're doing at the moment, which is saying in every other country in the world, quite reasonably, why should we take action because the rich countries aren't taking action? Meanwhile, we're being told there's no point in us taking action because the poor countries aren't taking action, the Chinese aren't taking action. This is the most unimaginably catastrophic and murderous vicious circle the world has ever seen. And we have to break it. And the only way we break that is by demanding that our governments in the rich world do what they have to.
There'll be some people watching this that will feel a bit outraged by what's happening today because they'll be saying, well, our government is doing something. For goodness sake, they're orchestrating, they're facilitating the COP26, the conference of the parties, to get people to talk about climate change and come up with a solution. They are doing something, so we should just leave them to it rather than be disruptive. What would you say to those people?
As the science makes abundantly clear, doing something is irrelevant. Doing what is necessary according to the science is the only thing that counts. You know, and this, I don't know if people saw, I'd hugely recommend, go online, look up XR Grandparents, ITV. I'm still slightly reeling from what feels like a sort of surreal experience because you actually had a presenter responsibly presenting what was going on. And what he said is, well, you know, he was talking to these grandparents, you know, one was this, I think, 65-year-old grandparent, the other was a 93-year-old great-grandparent, you know, retired teachers, university lecturers, you know, like, I think, you know, everybody is respectable in my book, but, you know, these are clearly people sort of respectable in mainstream eyes. And the presenter, for once, actually, like, almost called out what the government does on every single issue, namely, there's a big something terrible is going wrong. Loads of people are suffering. The government comes out with some comms saying we spent 73 million on this, or we spent 126 million on this. You know, all that counts is not them doing something, but like I say, them doing what is necessary.
And then doing everything possible.
And more to the point, like if they are going to say that they are a climate leader in the world while not doing anything like what the science demands, then that puts absolutely no pressure on any other country on the planet to deal with the science demands, right? Because if they're the climate leader, all they have to do is what the UK does, which is say we're going to be net zero by 2050. And this is, and beware, this is the entirety of the COP success narrative that they're trying to build, right? That you see Alan Sharma being interviewed this, he was like, when we started this process, only 40, I think it was 45 or 35% of the countries had agreed to net zero 2050. Now we're up to 65 or 70%. We can get to 100 by COP. Claiming that you're going to do net zero by 2050 means absolutely nothing. I mean, A, because they're not even on track to meet net zero 2050. B, because where you are in 2050 is utterly irrelevant. It's about the amount of carbon you emit between now and then. And C, most importantly, 2050 bears no relationship to 1.5 or 2 degrees. You know, we have terrible feedbacks in the system, you know, quite apart from the horrific crimes against humanity that are going on, suffered by poor people. This thing is running away from us like mad already. We're seeing terrifying melting in the Arctic. We've seen really disturbing science coming out of University College London, suggesting that the Amazon might be really close to a tipping point, where the entire Amazon forest, which is very near the equator, right? Like the only reason it functions is because it has sufficient scale and integrity to keep that rainforest going, to keep that water system going. And that water system is, you know, not only is it vital for storing carbon for the world, it's vital for the water cycle for North America and Europe as well. You know, even if you have a purely self-interested view, which I think deep down most people actually don't, but even if you do, it is in our interest to do what's required. And going back to what I was saying before, you know, and Bolsonaro does this, right? He comes out and says, well, why should we not chop down our forests? They did it, the rich countries did it. And what kind of argument do we have? Like, unless we're doing everything we can to, like, rewild our nature, to reforest, to do everything we can possibly do to undo the harm, then he gets away with that, right? Like, evil dictators always hang their propaganda on hooks of truth. And exactly the same in 1920s and 1930s. You know, it's the same with Trump. You know, Trump came along and said, you know, these elites, they don't care about you. Look at this stuff that they're doing to make themselves richer. It's true, right? And it's like Trump's not that elite, right? But because nobody else is saying it, if the mainstream is not addressing this, it allows these right-wing dictators to get away with it.
And you're speaking about dictators, there's a really great podcast at the moment out called Real Dictators, where they look at the stories of these awful people you mentioned originally, Stalin and others like him, that have completely destroyed communities and really countries from the global landscape because of their self-interest. And one of the things that came out in those spaces was the tactics, like you said, using propaganda to be able to try and belittle people who are trying to make a difference, saying that it's discrediting them. You're seeing that with our government now. We've been told we've been told incooperative trustees, we've been told many more things by Priti Patel.
Extremists, right? So they're literally trying to pin us with the same label they use for Al-Qaeda or ISIS terrorists.
Exactly, so I'd really like, if anyone's watching this, to have a look around when you're looking at these protests. See the doctors, the teachers, the scientists, the fathers, the family members, everybody pulling together here and saying, look, this is not one person, this isn't uncooperative trustees saying this is an issue. This is thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people that you are blatantly ignoring for totally inane reasons. It really just seems mad. It seems mad.
And we cannot say this often enough. Just like Greta, all we're saying is follow the science.
Yeah.
And follow the science precautionarily. Like, do everything that we have to do. Even if we think that some of the worst things might not happen, if they even might happen, when we are talking about the viability of life itself, anything other than everything that is possible while maintaining a reasonable life for everybody, anything other than that is utterly insufficient in this moment in history. And it should be clear for everyone to see, but we have an information system dominated by right-wing media billionaires. Like, there was a study a couple of years ago that put the UK way down in the list of press freedom, because we have an information system dominated not just by these 4 billionaires, but by the corporate advertising that pays for almost all media, right? So, you know, of course, a corporation is a legal entity that is required by law to maximise profit. So, of course, they're not going to want to put their adverts next to things that question that system, right? Like, none of this is sort of conspiracy in the kind of sense of stuff, sort of, a lot of stuff in the sense of things happening by closed doors. Everything that's happening in the world at the moment is happening as a matter of course in terms of the systems that we've set up. Anyone watching this, look up Priti Patel, tobacco lobbyist, and then read the Express article this morning that she wrote. You know, this is a woman who professionally, for decades, has tried to make the most awful things in the world look acceptable. And it's not just that she was a lobbyist for a tobacco company, she was a lobbyist for a tobacco company operating in Burma, which was, you know, operating based on slave labour conditions under dictatorship. You know, this woman is a professional at making awful things seem reasonable and making brilliant, like courageous things, like people, like normal people standing up for the institution of their children, look like terrible things, look like extreme activity. This is not extreme. You know, and as I'm always saying to people, if anyone has a better idea of how to try and make the necessary change happen, please let us know. We would far rather not spend nights in police cells and get vilified and, you know, all the things that people have to go through as rebels, right? So if you have a better idea, tell us what to do. But as far as the science that we see, as far as we understand it, the suffragettes, the Chartists, you know, these people that are part of a noble tradition of progress in this country, they use civil disobedience for a reason. And it's the same reason the Extinction Rebellion is successful, right? Like when nothing else works, coming out and disrupting things going on as normal is the only way to force attention. And putting yourself on the line for it is a big part of that as well. Because even if people disagree with this, they've got to recognise that clearly we must really care about this, right? And if we can use this platform over and over again to get people to see that all we're saying is do what the science demands for us to have a decent future for our children, then we have a hope of a decent future. And like I said before, again, we can't say this enough either. We have the capacity in the world like never before to create a beautiful, breathable, fairer world where everybody has enough. Like we're told this lie that it's capitalism that has given everyone progress. It's not. It's science, technology, it's the entire fruits of human understanding and endeavour over thousands of years. And if instead of giving most of the wealth and power to a tiny percentage that are thereby doing most of the damage to the planet, we actually share that reasonably, we can have a decent world for everybody, right? And everybody teaches their kids this. We know this when people are 5, but somehow we've been sort of bamboozled into thinking that, you know, in the real world, it operates entirely differently. So a system where billionaires, you know, get richer and richer and head towards being trillionaires, and they have more and more political and financial power, somehow that's going to benefit everybody, right? I mean, it's just madness what we've been brainwashed into believing, but it's there every day in the drip feed, right? So things that are stepping back from it, unbelievably unreasonable, are seen as just like the inevitable only way we can do things, and we have to break out of that because it's madness.
Now, George, you're sat behind the police lines, as are we, which means in a few moments you probably will be arrested. Is that fair to say? I would have thought so.
Probably.
Yeah.
I had plans tomorrow morning, so I wasn't planning to get arrested today. I was going to get arrested tomorrow, but I probably will end up getting arrested today. Yeah.
And can you explain really what has led you to this decision? Because you said we're not extremists here, everyone here is peaceful, there's signs on everyone's bodies, I'm peaceful, what about you, the police? This is not something we're trying to get violent about, we just want change to happen. And you're a dad, like this is not, you'd probably rather be with your child right now.
Yeah.
So
I want to twist the football without doing it. That's what anyone.
And instead you're getting arrested.
I wanted to work on, you know, that's what I really like to do. Like just doing like fun stuff, like most people want to be doing, right? Yeah. But unless we do this, we're screwed. You know, like and like I said, if anyone has a better idea, then let us know. But peaceful, non-violent, disruptive protest is pretty much the only thing that's changed in things like this in the past. So that's what we're trying. And let's face it, the awareness of climate change, the demand for much more urgent radical action is at a far, far greater level than it was 3 years ago. That's why we've seen so much acting from the government, right? But as Greta Thunberg said in her video recently, the acting we've seen from the government is not in the sense of taking action, it's pretending, you know, so their response to the public's, you know, increasingly visceral awareness of the threat that we're facing is to say impressive sounding things about what they're going to do in the very near future, and meanwhile, by sleight of hand, doing exactly the opposite in the present. And because the media is effectively in their pockets, or maybe they're in the media's pockets, you know, we don't get, you know, this should be on the front pages every day. You know, it should be government claims it's a climate leader, but meanwhile it's, you know, it's funding 27 billion of new roads. It's trying to expand every single airport, thereby obviously massively increasing our carbon emissions. But do we see those headlines in the press?
maybe the Guardian a bit. But yeah, so think. We just need to think for ourselves. Listen to the science. Think for ourselves, and go and look at the extremists in Parliament Square. Right? Look at that extremist. Martin Luther King. Go and look at the extremist Gandhi. Go and look at the extremist. Emmeline Pankhurst, I can't remember which suffragette it is in Parliament Square. But one more point I make about that is that these people are the symbols for thousands of ordinary people who in their day got to the point where they're like, I'm not standing for the fact that half the human race is treated as if they're somehow inferior human beings. I'm not standing for I'm not standing for a situation where people, because of the colour of their skin, get brutalised and, treated like subhumans and we steal all their stuff. It was normal people in their thousands that every one of those movements was made up of. And yes, like I said, there are these symbols of those movements, but we mustn't buy into the idea that it's just these sort of single amazing individuals. Because people respond to when Extinction Rebellion references those movements. People say, "Oh, what? So you're saying you're these like amazing people?" No, we're just like the normal people of today that have got to a point with a really crucial issue where we say we're not standing for it anymore. We are going to do what we can, not because we know it's going to work. Like the momentum in the world at the moment is entirely in the wrong direction, right? Like it was code red for humanity 20 years ago, and we've made it worse and worse and worse since. It's not just that we haven't acted; it's we've been making it worse every single day, and we continue to, right? Even during the pandemic, when emissions went down 6%, there was still massive emissions. We were still massively increasing the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere last year during the pandemic, just increasing it slightly less than before. So we have to change everything. It's really clear we have the alternatives on almost every front, not with flying, but then loads of our flying is flying that could be on trains instead if they made them cheap and affordable, right? Like, any remotely short-haul flight. But every other area of society, we have alternatives. But we have to have much greater equality because, quite simply, the inefficiency of the use of resources on the planet that comes from 10% using over 50% of resources, if the other 90% have to make do with the rest, then of course what happens? We destroy more and more of the planet to provide for people's needs. We just have to have a fairer world. And like I say, everyone understands that when it comes to their kids. Like, sure, everybody wants more stuff for themselves, but unless you work out how to make sure that everybody basically shares, which doesn't mean everybody having exactly the same in some sort of terrible communist nightmare, just some level of basic sharing and equality, so that people's work and lives are equally valued, right? Like, everyone must realise it's crazy for a nurse who works her ass off all day to save people gets like 1,000th as much money as somebody who like pushes buttons in the city. The finance is a really important job, but like finance is a really crucial part of like allocating money for things that are valuable to society for the future. But it's just crazy that some people get vastly more, and of course that rips apart the social cohesion because people don't feel that we're on the same team, right? And that feeds into divide and rule, which has been happening for thousands of years. And that's how we have a situation where everywhere in the world. Sorry. Okay, cool. But just to make the final point I might have made the other day, this is not just in Europe or America that people think that things are far too unequal and the elite have too much power. In Russia, in China, everywhere in the world, we all basically agree with each other. So let's bring about a better, fairer world.
Thank you so much.
Sorry
Good luck with the police today. No, you said a lot of very powerful things. Thank you very much, George. And I will.
Who just said that? Oh no. Okay, right, let's go. And then maybe I'll have a say on that.
Just watch your feet.
Oh God, let's not cause accidents. I just want to say that I am not a scientist. I'm an artist. We all, artists, everybody, we need to listen to the scientists. Yes, as artists, we can play our role occasionally, but it does feel a bit pathetic sometimes when we have an exhibition about environmental art. We have to listen to the scientists, so I'm here to honour all the scientists and all they're doing. I think I'm just going to hand over to my friend here. Hello, I'm here representing all children. My own son with his future ahead of him. All children all around the world
and all future generations, their lives compromised and threatened by what's happening from the last 30 years of carbon emissions. And Shell is complicit in that. And I feel that Shell should not be doing this sponsorship. It's completely wrong. And the IPCC report has said code red for humanity. How much clearer does that need to be? So I plan to stay here the whole night, as soon as possible, to make my point.
So I'm from the Citizens Assembly Working Group for XR UK, and as you may know, the Citizens Assembly on Climate and Ecological Justice is our third part. But more on a personal note first, it's really emotional to be here, and as a woman in my late 30s, it's very, very painful to see small children, not because I don't like small children, I love children, but because I'm not going to have it, because I don't think I can, in good conscience, put more life on this planet now when I don't trust that there is going to be a future for my potential children. And this is a really difficult thing to come to terms with. I don't think the likes of Shell give a flying hoot about that sort of emotion. Lots of my friends come to the Science Museum with their children, and as much as I'm delighted for all my friends who are all having babies right now, because that's the phase of my life that I am in, it's also extremely painful because I worry about them, I worry about those children, but obviously also I wish I could have children of my own. But anyway, so that's one of the reasons why I'm here. Obviously, also one of the reasons is that it's a complete joke that Shell is sponsoring this exhibition. To bring it back to citizens' assemblies, there was a citizens' assembly last year. It was called Climate Assembly UK, and it was wholly inadequate because it was going by the target of 2050, net zero emissions by 2050, which, as probably everybody in this room knows, is total nonsense, because it will not keep us below 1.50 degrees temperature increase. But what was very interesting about that citizens' assembly was that even though they weren't presented with adequate information, as in they were presented with information that was going to the 2050 target, they all agreed that carbon capture and storage was technology that is high in the sky at this point in time. That the time needed to make any of that kind of technology viable and actually do what it needs to do on the incredible scale that it needs to do it, it's not going to happen. So the Citizens Assembly, which are people like you and me, they're not scientists, they are people worrying about their own future, the future of their loved ones, the future of their children. They said, no, we are not willing to rely on that sort of fantasy, of that sort of myth that something will get invented for us that's going to remove all this carbon from the atmosphere. We know what needs to be done. We need to stop emitting. And that's why I think that exhibition over there, even though it does sort of say, yeah, we should also maybe stop emitting fossil fuel carbon dioxide, but it's okay because we have all these amazing solutions. It's total nonsense. And the power... And I think it really highlights the power of the collective intelligence of ordinary citizens, that when they come together, they don't buy into all this bullshit. They know that this is nonsense. So this is why I think all our demands are extremely important. Tell the truth, act now, but we also need to decide together. Ordinary citizens need to be part of this decision making of how we are going to fix this total shit show, because the politicians on their own can't do it. The scientists and the engineers clearly on their own cannot do it. They need us, the ordinary citizens, and this is what we want to do through our third demand, the Citizens' Assembly on Climate and Ecological Justice. Sorry, I'm really used to talking about Citizens' Assemblies, but this is really emotional. And there's lots of emotion here, which is wonderful, and thank you so much for being here. We give our talk about Citizens' Assemblies and the sort of technical side, and not less emotional of it. So every other week, so come talk to us at the new Citizens' Assembly back.
Welcome back. You're on the outside of the Science Museum now, where we are just in front of a massive lorry that's been pulled in front of the road to block the road outside the Science Museum. Pretty pertinent, given that we're outside the Science Museum. We're simply asking, can we listen to the science please now? We should have listened to it years ago. We still haven't. Something needs to be done, and it has to be done now. So that's why all these people are here, and that's why this van is here behind me here, saying enough is enough. Now, while we've got a lull in the conversation, let's see if we can hear from the person on top of the van. Hello! Could you tell me why you're out there? Now, you can't hear him. I'm just going to repeat back what you said, because we can't hear you all that well. So what you said on top of it is, we're here to demand that the government stops investing in fossil fuels. Was that right? I think that's what I heard you say. Now, this man on top of this van is probably going to get arrested today. And that's not something anybody wants to do here. It's not, you don't have to be arrested to be part of Extinction Rebellion. But these people have made this choice because they really feel like this is the last desperate attempt to try and get the people in power that need to make change, make that change. We've heard too much talk at this point and not enough actual action. And if you're wondering why on earth is she saying that, you know, we've got the Conference of the Parties coming up in Glasgow. Don't be silly, lady. There's lots going on. We're doing enough. Let me tell you that really, whilst it might seem the case, is definitely not the case based on our track record so far, where the UK has been investing so much money into the fossil fuel industry, which is exacerbating the climate crisis. You'll hear a lot of people talk today about ecocide. That is where people are committing atrocities that worsen the climate crisis and that ultimately end in devastation for everyone. These people around you here, this might seem extreme that they're here about to get arrested, but if they're not arrested here in a few years, who knows? What will the extreme weather conditions, the extreme weather events do to us as a society and to us as individuals and us as a community? We already know. Let's just run over some of those things that are happening before we talk to the man on top of the van again. Some of the extreme weather events that have been happening around the world. We've talked about Canada, Kuwait and America, those places that have had the worst or the highest temperatures on record. We now have 23 countries that have had over 50 degrees heating. That might not seem that much. In fact, it might seem quite nice, quite tropical, but actually that kills people and is responsible for killing 5 million people a year. 5 million! That's so many people. In addition, Sri Lanka, Mexico, Bhutan and Nepal have had massive flash floods, which have led to landslides, which has led to people losing their homes, livelihoods, and they have not had a reason to continue living. So is this extreme? I ask you, probably not. What I just explained to you is extreme. These extreme weather conditions that are perpetuated by governments like ours here in the UK, and by, frankly, places like the Science Museum that are facilitating meetings with Shell, who know full well the devastation that they are doing by pulling fossil fuels out of the ground and increasing carbon emissions by exorbitant amounts. So let's chat to the man on top of the van one more time. Again, this van over here. I'm going to have to repeat what he says because we can't quite hear him. Could you tell me a bit more? What's got you standing on there? I'm going to repeat back what you say. He's got 2 young children. And I'm terrified by the world that we're going to leave them. And also the questions they'll ask me one day. And what were we doing when we still had time to prevent the worst? Thank you. That's powerful enough, isn't it? Now, are you a parent watching this? How did that make you feel? That's pretty awful, isn't it? We spoke to loads of people yesterday. One very young lady said, if I'm honest, I'm not here for my children's future, I'm here for mine. I'm here for mine because this is threatening me. We've had communities in Doncaster completely destroyed by the climate crisis. We're seeing coastlines in Wales eroded, people having to move already. We're likely to see... Oh, we're not. The police are trying to talk to him up there, just checking he's got no medical problems. That's good. Seems police on this side are friendly enough. Now, as we go, let's keep walking around and see if we can speak to anyone else about why they're here. I can see that there's a big dead dog here. Guys, are either of you happy talking on camera? Yeah, amazing, brilliant. My name's Alice. Could you introduce yourselves, please? Sure. Hi, I'm Ruth. You're Ruth? Abigail. Okay, why are you here with a dead dog? So it's a dead greyhound. So we're Exile Waltham Forest, so it's our local symbol from Walthamstow Dog Track. But more generally, been here listening to really inspiring speeches from climate scientists, from all sorts of different people, and just feel really hopeless at times that our government isn't taking action, isn't doing the things it needs to do when the science is so clear, and so feel like the only safe reaction is to come and disrupt business as usual. Now, you've got a dead animal on your back. For me, one of the things that really is emotive is knowing that we've lost 68% of the world's wildlife in the last 40 years. Yeah. And likely in the next 40 years, that's going to be even worse. We know that about 100 companies are responsible for 71% of carbon emissions. And we know that when we see these horrific things happening on the news, where entire communities are being destroyed, coastlines are being eroded, sea levels are rising and completely eradicating countries in the Pacific, things like that. I'm hearing all these things, these statistics, these huge moments happening, and knowing that our country is one of the richest nations is really funding that destruction. Though we might be miles away from these people, though it might be happening in a much lesser extent here, we're definitely party to that. How does that make you feel as British citizens, knowing that our government is a party to exacerbating the climate crisis in the way it is? I think that's one of the biggest issues for me, is the inequality of the crisis at the moment, and that this year everybody's woken up in this country and people are a bit worried, but they're completely ignoring the fact that in the rest of the world this is happening all the time. The UNCHR are saying that 20 million climate refugees every year now, and it's just going to get more and more and more and more. But to the countries that have not caused it, we're causing it, and we're just sitting back and going, yeah, sorry, we're causing you all to live in horrific situations, and we're causing you all to not be able to farm on your land and to have everything ruined and your whole livelihood taken away from you. But we don't care. We don't want to change our life. And that's just absolutely disgusting that Britain's such a big part of that. But of course, that's what we do. That, our colonialism, our capitalism, they're the same thing. We've done this to the world over and over and over again. And this could be our turning point. This could be our time to say we're going to actually help the world and stop ruining the world for once. And listen to Indigenous peoples and listen to the global south and what they're telling us to do and take instruction and actually try to help. Why don't we do that? Why don't we stop being the country that causes the destruction, funds everything from blood money? Why don't we turn that corner? Yeah, absolutely. And if you're wondering more about blood money, which is what you just spoke about there, you can have a look at some of our streams from yesterday where we talked about how unacceptable it is that the money that it goes into this country is unfortunately fueled by fingers in pies that are causing human and animal disasters around the world due to the climate crisis and also a colonial and imperialist history. Now, I wanted to touch on what you just said there for a second, because you mentioned they're saying we're doing all this destruction elsewhere. I don't know about you, but I've never seen the government say, oh, we have anything to do with the destruction in Kuwait or the drought happening in Pakistan or all of those things. Our government has never come out and said we're responsible, let's do something about it. It's very single-minded of what we can do in the UK, or like it's not like we need to prevent our devastation without acknowledgement of that bigger picture, which is really problematic, I think. Really problematic. What was the moment for you that you realised that we had something to do with this, and that you felt the need to actually come here? You're within, so for anyone watching who's not quite sure, we're within a kettle right now, which is where we're surrounded by police, and they're slowly going to be picking out protesters and arresting them. So everybody within this space is likely to be arrested. So that includes the two of you and this dog today. What is it that made you realise you need to be here?
I think it's sort of, I feel like climate change is something I've been aware of for a long time. I've, had lectures at university where people have said, your generation needs to do something about this. And it's kind of, I feel like it was one of those things that niggled in the back of my head for a long time, and I felt worried about it, didn't know what I could do. And I went to an Extinction Rebellion talk, and the kind of the idea that like we just have to put our bodies on the line and take responsibility for our sort of personal contribution to the crisis, for the country's contribution to the crisis, and so we can come and make a difference. We don't have to be bystanders, and I think it was that switch of like, and even if this isn't, maybe this won't work, maybe it will. I hope it will, but we got to try. And I think it was that moment of saying like, I'm gonna come and do my best, and put myself out.
Well, that was the thing. The gentleman up there on top of the van, which must be a pretty scary but kind of interesting place to be. He's looking down. He's looking very somber. Yeah, he's on his own. I know, but probably would be much nicer to be able to have someone to talk to up there. But he was saying, I can't bear the thought of having my children, when they're older, be like, why didn't you do? What did you do when there was a time to do something? Do you have any family members that are motivating you? Yeah,
I've got a 17-year-old son, so his future is quite horrific. Any kids at the moment, their future is going to be awful, and not in 50 years. In 10 years' time, let's be clear, London's probably going to be underwater a lot of the year. And it's just awful to think what his life will be, and what I took for granted. I wasn't like a lot of the people here. I did not know. I was a management consultant. I was flying every single week to Switzerland, and people used to say to me, "Oh, aren't you worried about your carbon footprint?" And I used to go, "Oh yeah," because I knew I recycled and I knew a little bit, but I was naive enough to think that if it was as bad as it is, the government and the businesses wouldn't let me do it. I wouldn't be able to fly every week. There would be some discussion about it. There would be some thought about why I was travelling and, causing the destruction which it was causing. And it never happened. And when I discovered on my own and started talking to my colleagues who didn't believe me, and still don't, a lot of them, I just couldn't believe how much ignorance, and not deliberate ignorance, there is out there because no one's telling us. So when XR was talking about tell the truth, it truly is what we need right now. We need everybody to know what's happening, because nobody really understands what's happening. And a lot of people don't want to be part of it, but they don't realise how bad it is and what they're doing.
I think that's a really key point. It's one of the top demands is to tell the truth. And then if we can tell the truth, we can react to that truth. If you knew watching this, the COVID pandemic was coming, but there were some things that you could do to prevent that, which ultimately is also the same things that could be done to prevent the climate crisis, because the two feed into each other. If you knew that, wouldn't you do anything in your power to prevent that? Absolutely, you'd be mad not to. So now we know that the climate crisis is worsening all over the world, and is currently and will destroy so many people, animals, homes, places. Let's do anything we can. Thank you so much for talking to me. Let's keep going round now. Now, if you're watching this, now you're just tuned in and you're thinking, where on earth are you? There's lots of noise. I don't like it. Let me explain. We're outside the Science Museum. The Science Museum is supposed to be holding science in high esteem, yet it's ignoring the science by inviting spaces for Shell to talk and to have a space to be heard. Shell is one of the world's most polluting organisations, responsible for taking so many fossil fuels out of the ground, and that is outrageous. They've actually known, Shell has known for a very long time about the consequences. We just spoke to two ladies over there who were talking about how they don't have They didn't have the privilege of that knowledge for the same amount of time as Shell has. If they had, perhaps they would have done something sooner. We talked to George earlier, who was explaining if there is anything that you think that we could do differently that isn't sitting on the street and trying to cause civil disobedience completely peacefully, please, please, please tell us what they are. So if you're watching this, please add your opinion in the comments. If you disagree, wonderful. Please be cynical. Ask the questions in the comments. If you're watching it and you know a bit more as well and you can respond to those comments, please do. Let's get the conversation started. Let's see if we can mobilise together. Here around us we've got mothers, like we just spoke to, their fathers, like we spoke to before, and on top of that van behind us there with the Extinction Rebellion flag is a father of 2 as well. We've got doctors, lawyers, academics, people who are your next door neighbour probably. This is an ordinary movement of people, ordinary people coming together. No matter what your skill set is, we need you. Behind you you've got the musicians, the people are brilliant at banging a drum. They're bringing the motivation, so important. If you have the ability to bang a drum, there's a place for you there. We've got a car here in the middle of the road, a massive lorry that's blocked the road today to try and get the attention of the people in power to say, look, this is the extent we're willing to go to get attention on this. And more than attention, we want an action. We want action. That's what we want. So if you're a driver, there's a place for you. If you're a cyclist, look, we've got bikes over there, people cycling around trying to help where they can. If you're an arty person, look, we've got banners here that I think say listen to the science. We've got all sorts going on. Oh, we're inside now. You also see there's people inside the Science Museum as well. So if you're wondering why I went quiet for a moment there, just checking the footage to see where we're in. We can see people are locked on inside the Science Museum. If you're wondering what a lock-on is, that means that they have chained themselves to something with the intention of staying there as long as possible. Why would they want to stay there as long as possible? Well, so that we can talk about it for as long as possible. The longer they can stay there, the more we can talk about it, the more headlines we can get. We've spoken about before how the news media really struggle. They really struggle a lot of time to report the climate crisis in the way that it is. Have you seen the headlines this week? Oh my goodness! There's been some headlines talking about waste. There's been, oh, we're inside again. Are we hearing from us or what? Oh, okay, great. So as you're looking around these people and you can see them in here, surrounded by policemen in suits, just remember that we're here to try and get the attention of you watching this. We're not trying to preach to the choir, so please, if you are watching this and you're an environmentalist, wonderful. But we want to get this message far and wide and get as many people involved as possible. We want as many chairs at the table as possible. Everyone is important in this, because this is not a divisive issue. This involves all of us. So please share this video with at least 5 other people so that we can get that out there, we can get more people here, and we can get more action, because we need all the action we can. So as I was saying, you're probably looking at, oh no, you're looking at me now. Wasn't sure. You'll be going between here and also the inside of the Science Museum where there are people locked on, trying to talk to those people at the Science Museum saying, why are you facilitating a fossil fuel company that's so responsible for ignoring the science? If you knew the science meant that we're in a code red, why on earth are you pulling fossil fuels out the ground? Yesterday we had the Blood Money March. Today we are talking about the UK's imperialist and colonialist history. Oh, the police are moving in now, it seems. So, asking people to move up. Let's see if we can talk to anyone. Move up to the light! Hi guys, can I ask you to say anything? Move up to the light! No. They don't want to speak to me apparently. What does that say? When people in power, and these people really do have power, the police, what does it say when they won't say anything about the climate crisis or about how they feel? This involves them too. No matter what your stature. Now let's see if we can talk to... Okay. Now let's see if we can talk to anybody else that's here. Yeah. Oh, brilliant. Hello. Nice to see you. We've got another future arrestee in our site here. Would you be able to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Stripe.
And you're Stripe, fantastic Stripe. And why are you here?
Well, it was because I was reading in the paper. I was a bit late around the table with this, but I think it was independent, and it was talking about the Science Museum, and I don't know if the general public knows, but apparently the Science Museum, basically to get money for its current exhibition about the future of the planet, it got sponsored by Shell, but it had to sign a gagging order, so it couldn't say anything bad about basically what Shell does, which is basically affecting the future of the planet. And I was just so unbelievably outraged. I mean, I'm a parish clerk, you know, I have a very conservative job, and I work for local councils. I don't easily break the law, but I just felt like so much is happening at the moment, and it's just not in the press and in the media, and I felt I needed to make a stand.
Now, there'll be a lot of people who are quite surprised by what you just said, because for some people, Extinction Rebellion seems like an extreme movement of people that don't really know what they're talking about. If you've been looking at the climate crisis and seeing how many politicians are wrapped up in this world of planet polluting, you'll realise that that's probably not something that you should be so feeling safe about, that the government's got your interest in hand. There we go. Could you offer any insight from somebody who does work for your local council and things like that?
Well, I work for local council, so we're like the first tier of local government. We're the parish and town councils, and a lot of that, basically, to start with, parish councils don't get paid, so they're not in it for the money, they're not in it for the publicity. They are trying to protect their communities. The community I come from floods. We've got grouse shooting on top of our moors, which is destroying our moors, which is, you know, basically the moors, the peat bogs are the carbon sink. And so our councillors are really concerned about it, and they're really concerned about it because the residents are really concerned about it. I mean, literally our town has flooded 5 times in the last 6 years. It's really shocking. So I think that at a local level, the first tier of government, I think some of those people really do care, but I think by the time it reaches Whitehall, it just becomes so confused and so corrupt and so much to do with self-interest. I mean, when we had COVID, and it's still nearly at the top of the news items, but we're in this climate crisis, and it doesn't even get mentioned. I mean, I think the BBC News itself probably has a gagging order because it just refuses to mention it. And I don't want to be one of the people that just sits there and says, oh, I didn't know what to do, or it wasn't that bad. You know, we are the generation that it is our fault, and the previous generations, and the very least we can do is actually try and get that word out there.
Now, you said it is your fault. I've been thinking a lot about this lately, because I think my mother is quite upset sometimes, because she sort of feels sometimes like I'm accusing her of destroying the world, but she obviously didn't know. She didn't know about the level of the climate crisis or the fact that we were exacerbating it. She was an air stewardess, so she would go all around the world and had no idea that the consequences of that were huge. It's not, when we're talking about companies like Shell, they've known for years, I think it's 30 years, isn't it, or something even more than that maybe, that the consequences of what they were doing is actually making things a lot worse. There's a great book called Merchants of Doubt where it talks about how just by making people feel like, well, these companies, although they do awful things, they set the fire, they also provide a little bit of water to put out as well, because they're contributing money towards places like the Science Museum that are telling people that they need to do something. So in some ways, I feel like by doing that, they're trying to tell us that, you know, this needs to be something that we need to focus on. We'll literally help you do that in some way. It's kind of.
I'm so tired and frustrated of trying to treat people for illnesses that don't need to exist and which are going to get worse, and sending them back out into a world which is making them sick. And that's why I'm here today to say we need to rethink how we do this. We need to create a world where healthcare is a minor part of our lives, and the world in which we live allows us to flourish and be healthy. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Swallow. I'm a member of XIU. And yeah, I'm kind of here to talk about something else that's pissed me off about this mission that hasn't really been brought up yet. So I used to come here as a school kid. I loved it here. I loved the science bit. The big Earth we used to go through, that was sick. It was awesome. And then at school I did science at A-level and I'm now a second year physics student. And I was really excited to be here again, to be honest. I wanted to come in here early and just wander around. But when I got to the end of the line, you know, walked down there, I got really pissed off because Shell had taken something of ours. Something of ours that's precious. They have taken our voice. Inside a glass cabinet back there, just behind thick glass, are 3 youth strike posters saying keep our earth cool with an ice cream stick and act green now. That is our voice being used as advertising. That is our voice being taken by a company that is destroying our futures and saying, look how great we are. Look, we're talking about youth strikers. Oh, we love the youth strikers. We're bored of it, and it's happened before. It will happen again. And as young people, our voices are constantly commodified and constantly put down by big companies who just want to look like they're doing the right thing. And I'm really bored of it. And all I would say to the museum is you can have those banners and you can have those posters. And you know what, maybe I'll come and do a talk at some point. But not if you continue to take money from Shell. Shell out!
Hey everyone, my name's Aaron. It's so lovely to see you all here today. A couple of months ago, a few of us in Scientists for Extinction Rebellion, we locked ourselves onto the exhibit at the back of the hall. And now we come back a lot stronger because you're all with us. So thank you very much. There's been a lot of great speeches here, and I don't want to add anything else to that because you've all said what needs to be said. But I thought I might read a couple of poems for you. Seeing as that you're going to be here tonight, I thought it'd just make a bit of a change. So this was a poem I actually wrote back in 2017, before all of the rebellion got going. And I think you can see how things have changed a little bit since I wrote this. So this poem is called Climate of Silence. What tricksy Celtic pixie has cast its guise upon us all, such that as much as we may try to cry our alarm, our tongues must trip and our words fall. Is the source the same fickle force as Apollo used to gag Cassandra, giving her the gift of foresight, but preventing her, try as she might, to tell another of what she saw afore her? Are we struck dumbfounded, confounded by the magnitude of what we've unleashed? Are we made mute by the shame of the outcome of our pursuits? Or is our silence indifference? I think not the latter, for when asked if they're worried about it, people will say yes. But when asked about what they are worried about, people won't say it. It saddens me to say that when quizzed by survey, 4/10 of those polled recalled not once having had a conversation about our dire situation. Of the remainder, the large majority confessed the topic's low priority meant that the chats that did take place lasted for just 10 measly minutes. 10 minutes on the greatest challenge we face. So what is to be done? We need sharp wits and pointed tongues to slice the invisible barrier. We need to pound the drums. We must make a great fuss and ado, a hullabaloo to end this taboo. We need stories. We need songs. We need poems and pictures to send out a warning, not to lecture, but to talk heart to heart about global warming. Thank you.
Who's this? Snowy. Snowy. How cute is Snowy? Look at Snowy here. One of the many dogs of XR in the arrestee ring. Is Snowy going to be arrested today? I hope not. I hope not. Would you mind talking to us? We're on XR Live. Oh, fantastic. What's your name?
My name's Ian.
Ian. Fantastic, Ian. And why are you about to get arrested today?
Oh, I'm not going to get arrested.
You're not going to get arrested?
No, the dog. I can't get arrested because
I was gonna say,
even if it's a dog pound, he wouldn't like that.
No, I was going to say that would be...
supporting role.
Oh, okay.
So he's therapy dog, so people stroke him, they chill out, he chills out, it's all good.
Oh, nice, that's lovely. Now, how do you feel about knowing that the building that we're outside here is getting funding from Shell and is unable to talk about how Shell is a problem, and this is a scientific building?
Well, it's not right, is it? Shell shouldn't be supporting our museum with their lies.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, when we talk about listen to the science, how do you feel about that phrase? Do you think that's happening right now? We are listening to the science, or do you think we've got some work to do?
We're listening to the science. The scientists listen to the science. The doctors, and a growing proportion of people are listening to the science, I think. But I think making vast profits out of destroying the Earth couldn't be for the science for a lot of people.
Now, I think it's shocking that you and I know about this to this extent, and yet things aren't being done in line to react to that emergency. We really should be the last port of that sort of information in some way. I'm glad that we're not, but it's surprising to me that everyone here can get access to that science and recognise that we're not acting on it to the same degree. Yeah. To what extent does that shock you, or is that something that you feel is just a pattern?
It's a pattern. Anti-science has become popular over the last few years. Fake news in all sorts of areas of life is being propagated as being the truth when it clearly isn't. And that's the saddest thing for me, really, is that so many people have been hoodwinked by the mass media and the lies that they churn out, and also the fringe websites which propagate all sorts of nonsense as well.
Now, what was it that shocked you the most, out of the stuff that you've read about the climate crisis, about the research that you've done? What was the moment for you where you were like, oh my goodness, this is just not acting fast enough?
Well,
we need to do something.
it was seeing Gail Bradbrook's heading for Extinction Talk 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Which I was already like dimly aware and like doing what I could, but it was seeing Gail Bradbrook talking 3 years ago which got us onto the street.
Yeah. Now it looks like someone's talking over here, so we're going to come back in a moment. But thank you so much. Thank you, Snowy. Let's see what's happening. No, so let's keep going. We're going to keep going over here while this is happening. If you're wondering what on earth is happening here, well, we're outside the Science Museum. We've got people who have arrested here. There's a big structure over here that you can see if you look around that was erected and then taken down, and these are some of the people that were involved or are said to be involved in this. Now, we're going to try and talk to one of those people now. We can't go beyond this man, so if we walk around this way, then maybe we can at least, we're not going to go closer, we're not going to go past you, we just need to be able to hear him. So, hiya.
Just so you know, he is under caution.
Yeah.
Right, so you might not want to do that.
We're just going to ask him about the climate crisis.
I don't want him saying anything that might get him in trouble.
We're not allowed to even contact now. But if he talks about the climate crisis, that's not going to get him in trouble. That's going to get you in trouble and me in trouble.
It's not, is it? Because I'm not talking to him.
No, we're talking about the climate crisis.
About anything that can get him in trouble.
Okay, well,
we're here to save our children's futures. We face an existential threat. Our leading scientists have told us that we need to take civil action, civil disobedience. Even our leaders, such as Angela Merkel, have told us we need civil disobedience. This is the only thing in social history that has achieved major change. So, all we really want to do is save the future for our children and all our futures and all the species that live on this planet. And this is the only thing we can do to stop it. We've done everything else. We've waved banners, we've been on marches, we've been campaigning for 20 to 40 years. I've done it for 20 years, and this is all we've got left.
now you said you've been campaigning for 20 plus years. I can see the lady next to you is also with you today. I imagine that everybody here is fairly informed on the climate crisis and the lack of action that's happening to sort of change that outcome. Have you seen any changes in the last 20 years of your campaigning?
There's been lots of promises, but there's clearly not been enough action because we're still headed for catastrophe. If we've seen the recent IPCC report, we're in red alert, and yet we've been campaigning for 40 years. So this is the sort of thing we need to do now. This is how people manage to get the votes, and other people manage to get the votes in this country and other countries. This is how civil rights were founded. By people taking civil disobedience, but it really needs to happen.
And in the last 20 years, we've seen a lot of changes. Like we were talking about earlier, about how we've lost 67% or 68% of the world's wildlife in the last 40 years.
In terms of negative changes,
yeah.
We've lost something like 3/4 of our insects. I mean, make us to think what kind of structure that underlies that in terms of biodiversity and what's going to happen when we reach a certain point.
Now, some people might say, you know, insects, I don't like them. It's quite good that they're not here. They might say, we're about to have Barcelona-style heating in this country. I quite like Barcelona. It means I don't have to go abroad. Can I have it here? Sounds lovely. What would you say to those people?
Well, food crops are going to fail all around the world, even in a nice country like ours. Well, our country nice compared to others, but even in a country that feels safe like ours, we may start to find in years to come, not just yet, that there's going to be no food in the supermarkets. Can we imagine what will happen when there's not enough food in the supermarkets? People are going to start fighting. People are going to start killing each other.
And it's quite pertinent that you say that, because right now we're sat in Kensington, which surprisingly for me is I found out it's got one of the highest crime rates in all of the London boroughs. So when we're talking about how this impacts people and how violence and things like that will inevitably come out. We saw what happened with the COVID pandemic with people trying to get toilet rolls. Imagine if food was a scarcity. This would be a really big deal. Yeah.
People will start attacking people for what they've got in their gardens and what they've got in their houses. They won't just starve, but they will starve, they will fight before they starve. Society will break down. The government has already broken its contract with society because they're supposed to protect us. But they're not protecting us because we're heading for catastrophe. So, we feel that as the contract has been broken, we are not breaking the law. As the contract with the government and society is already just go around the other side of the fence.
Okay, so as I was saying, so what we were...
So that's the problem. You'll just slide along. Or you can go on the other side of the fence.
Well, we can go round this way. Let's head round this way. So as we were saying before, I'm just talking to somebody who's in handcuffs right next to us here. We've just been told to move on slightly, so we're moving direction. I do just want to ask you one last question. So I follow Farmers for XR is a thing, which is great. So if you are a farmer and you're worried about your crops, please let us know and get involved. I follow a few of them, and they've been talking about how the extreme weather that we've even been having in the UK, not quite extreme, always going off now. Do you have anything else you want to say? And off he goes. That's another person being arrested to try and get action happening. Now, we've spoken to several police today, or we've tried, saying, how do you feel about the climate crisis? Do you feel safe? I don't feel safe, do you? Do you watching this? Let us know. Comment, tell us what you think. We want to know. Yeah. Hi. Can I ask you how you feel about the climate crisis? Do you feel safe?
Please keep moving, please. We're here just to make sure that it's a peaceful protest, okay, and that no offences are being committed. So we just want everybody to go onto the pavement for now, okay, so they're not obstructing the highway, because that is an offence, okay?
Okay.
You're allowed to protest. We're happy with you guys protesting, as long as it's in a safe distance and you're not causing any offences.
Has it been peaceful so far? Can you tell me? Can you tell me if it's been peaceful so far?
I've just got here.
You've just got here. Okay. Has anyone reported of it being not peaceful?
Not to me, not to me.
No. Now, I would love to know, because obviously you've got a vested interest in your future, and I feel empathy for you just as me and everybody else.
We can't have a political opinion or any opinion on any matter, okay?
You can't have an opinion as a police officer at all?
No.
Not even if it regards your future?
No. So, well, I'm just here to do a job, okay? And that job is to make sure that no offences are being committed, okay? That's all I'm here for.
Okay, so you don't want to comment on the climate crisis? Thank you very much. That's quite something, isn't it? When you talk to people who have so much responsibility, and inevitably people hear police officers, they're normal, completely normal people, they're fathers, sisters, brothers. These are mothers in many cases. These are people who have a vested interest in the longevity of life for themselves, for their friends, for their families. The police are moving in a bit more now, so we're going to move a bit more this way. Oops. So I would love to know what your opinion is. Please put it in the comments. If you have any questions for the police, please put them in the comments too. Or if you have any questions for anybody here about to be arrested, please pop them in the comments. And I would love to, and I'll find out what those are and see if I can ask anyone here. As you can see, the police are now surrounding a bit closer to here. And we don't really want to focus too much on the police because it isn't really about them. It's much more about the climate crisis and trying to put a spotlight on exactly what this man's sign here says, which is no more fossil fuels. Can I ask you, are you up for being interviewed? Yeah, okay, amazing. Hi. Now I can see you've got, I think there might be an arrest going on over here. Do you want to get a bit closer? We're going to see what's happening. Now, as we said, we're not going to be focusing on the police too much, but it is important to see what's happening to peaceful protesters as they're trying to prevent climate disaster consequences. So we're just going to film this man here. Oh, sorry. Can we ask you a few questions now? So can we ask, what is it that's brought you here today? Why are you worried?
Well, we're in the middle of a climate emergency, and it's been affecting the global south for decades, and now we're starting to see the effects in Europe. We've seen drastic climate effects in July all over Europe, and including in London, where we've seen drastic flooding. So that's why I'm here.
Where's the emergency vehicles? We're being told about emergency vehicles. Have a look round. Can you see any? I can't see any. Where are these emergency vehicles they're talking about? This is one of the propaganda tactics, I think, that is happening as a result of the protests and the bad press that's been coming through from some of them, talking about ambulances not being able to get through and things like that. I would really recommend that you be cynical on that, see if you can see any evidence of what's being said there, because I haven't seen any. And right now we've been told there's an emergency vehicle. Let's just have a listen for a second. Any emergency vehicles? I don't think so. Can you hear one there? Is it just me? I don't know. Anyway, let's keep having a look around. I don't think we can talk to him anymore because he's now behind a police line, and we can't get in front of that. So should we keep moving this way and see who we can talk to here? Hi guys, is there anyone here that would be comfortable speaking on camera? No? Anybody here? That's okay. Let's keep looking now. Oh, over here we've got a sign saying imagine the impossible. Now, I'm a big fan of TED Talks. Have you listened to a TED Talk lately? There's a great TED Talk that talks about if we were able to go beyond imagining
the worst possible points of the climate crisis. Instead, imagine if what would happen if we solved it, if we did all the things that we were supposed to do. So have a look online for that. It's really worth listening to. Filled me with a bit of hope. It was written retrospectively, talking about how great the consequences, how great the world was now that we've solved or limited the climate breakdown. It was really great, worth listening to.
What if?
And the film What If is definitely worth watching as well. There's so many different resources. If you know any other ones, if you'd recommend anyone else watch that, both from a perspective of someone who knows nothing about the climate crisis, because there could be some people here who are really not that aware and want to know why this is necessary. Let's have a look around this way because you can see what's happening here. And maybe we could also recommend some links to them, some books, anything that you can think of, books, documentaries, films, audio, kinesthetic, oral listeners, so that we can get that learning out for everyone. Because we can only act on the truth if we know that the truth is real. And in fact, this is probably quite a good time. You can see George over there seems to have run in the pink slides, and that might be that today's not his time to get arrested. We're not going to talk to George though now, because we did speak to him earlier. I just want to take a moment while we're moving down this line to remind ourselves of the demands of XR. There are 3 very clear demands. So when you're looking at people inside the Science Museum locked on, and when you're looking at people here losing their liberty as a result of wanting to push for action, let me explain what those demands are. Number 1 is tell the truth about climate change. This means we know the extent of the emergency. 30 years on plus, I would argue, we have not acted as if this is an emergency. If you knew what the COVID pandemic was going to be before it happened, wouldn't you do everything that you could to try and prevent that? Yes, you would. So let's act as if the truth was real. So acting on this truth means that we have to meet net zero targets by 2025. There's an amazing report that's been published 2 weeks ago by the UN's top scientists. It's called the IPCC report, and in it talks about how we are at code red for the climate emergency. Earlier we heard from Claire Farrell. If you haven't seen that, check out one of our earlier streams. And in there she talks about how one of the people that has contacted XR is one of the authors of that report, who said actually, as much as we wanted to publish the true truth of all of this, we had to be even a little bit conservative in what we published. That's pretty scary, isn't it? That even that code red is a conservative estimate. So act on that truth. 2025 might seem like an unrealistic deadline. It has to be the deadline according to the scientists. We cannot wait anymore. We have to act now. Then the third demand is to move beyond politics to create a citizens' assembly. There's all sorts of resources you can find out online to find out exactly what that sounds. I know citizens' assembly sounds like an ugly word. Is there anyone in this line here who would be comfortable talking on camera? Yeah, perfect. Let's head over here. So you've got a sign here that says, in action is fucking illogical. Fucking count. You're allowed to say that. It's not quite the rude one. Hi. Could you introduce yourself? Let's give you a name, actually. Why don't we call you Chloe? Let's say you're Chloe.
Yeah, I'm Chloe. Nice to meet you.
Could you tell me why you're here? What's got you so nervous here?
Why am I at Extinction Rebellion, or why am I specifically at the Science Museum?
You could do either of those, both if you like.
I joined Extinction Rebellion just protest because I kind of just got tired of all the climate anxiety getting to me, and it's so easy to just bury your head in the sand and feel completely powerless. So I think, joining a sort of large civil disobedience, like non-violent movement is actually like a really proactive way of actually doing something positive and joyful and happy and active with all of that frustration, instead of just feeling useless and overwhelmed and depressed all the time. And the reason that I'm specifically here at the Science Museum is because I love science, I love science fiction. That's why I've got my Mr. Spock sign. And the science is completely unequivocal, and it's a joke that we're not listening to it. It's not an extreme position to say that we're in a climate crisis and we need a radical systemic change. That's actually a moderate, reasonable, evidence-based position that is entirely backed up by science and by everything that we know. So I feel really passionate about science in particular, which is why I came here today. I think it's a great outreach tool. Kids love science. There were kids coming past and getting involved in the activities and that. So yeah, and I think it's a joke that Shell sponsor exhibitions in the Science Museum as basically it's a form of greenwashing. You know, they're promoting science. Well, actually, they've, you know, companies like them have spent 30 years actively trying to erase the science and bury the science, and they're ignoring the science, and their entire business model is predicated on deliberately ignoring the science for profit. So I think it's a total joke that they're represented in the Science Museum. So that's why I'm specifically at this action today.
Thank you very much for explaining that so eloquently. That was lovely. Can I ask, what do you mean by big systemic change? For some people, they'll be watching this and they'll be like, yeah, these protesters are here, but I can't relate to them. They don't actually have a plan.
Yeah.
What do you think to that?
In terms of like what systemic change means?
Yeah, what does it mean, and what do you think that could look like?
I really think that what we need is a massive overhaul of the way that government works in this country. I think we need to be able to hold corporations a lot more accountable. I think at the moment, unfortunately, governments are really in the pocket of big business. I think you've seen that increasingly with the current Conservative cabinet. I mean, I know, like, obviously, at an event like XR, people tend to be on the left. They tend to.
I think that's applause of another person being taken away by the police. But as you were saying, carry on.
They tend to not be, you know, the most recent Conservative governments have been like very, very noticeably more in the pocket of private corporations, of in big business, of all of these forces that benefit from the status quo, from keeping doing things as we are, so that they can make as much money as they can while everyone else dies. So what we need is a society where actually money is transparent, where that money is not being siphoned off by the top 1% to fuel their own corporate interests, but actually we have a more socially equal society that's based on renewable energy. You know, the government still subsidises fossil fuels. I mean, that's ludicrous. That's you know, one of the biggest industries in the world is subsidised. Sorry, do they need help? Do they need our taxpayers' money? That's what they get. You know, like, we make so much of a fuss about like one or two people cheating benefits out of the system. What about the road lobby? What about the fossil fuel lobby that receive millions and millions of pounds in taxpayers' money every year to fund something that's literally just a money-making exercise destroying the planet? That's the kind of system change we need. Like, that political will to do government differently and actually do government ethically.
I think that's a really important point to mention with taxpayers. We're talking about taxpaying, and for some people on the comments for these videos, they'll say things like, what a waste of taxpayers' money. There's police here that are having to be on the streets looking after you guys because you're doing this. Well, for anyone watching, I'm sure HS2, I haven't met one person that thinks HS2 is a good idea. That's the high-speed railway that's going through the UK right now, obliterating 108 ancient woodlands, 600, something like 20 sites of scientific interest, 600 wildlife conservation areas. It's really worth looking up the statistics. I'll read them out to you properly in a moment. I've got them all written down. And as a taxpayer, you unknowingly are paying £7,000+ a year in that. It's outrageous. Now, thank you so much for talking to me. I'd love to talk to you more, but we're going to head back into the museum now to see what's going on inside, where people are locked on.
Yes, so we're still at the Science Museum. We're going to be here all night now. We've heard some inspirational speeches from people who work in all different areas that relate to the Science Museum. We've heard from teachers, we've heard from doctors and nurses, and we've heard from the scientists, of course, as well, and people working on citizens' assemblies. And we've been asked several times to move on now by the police, while the police have given us a warning, and we've had people also from the museum asking us to move on the security, but we're getting into a sort of mellow tone now here, so I'm just going to give you some pictures of that. Watch them grow. They will much more.
And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Yeah, I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
There's still, we reckon about, well, I did think about 100, but now it might have thinned out a bit. People waiting here. We put out some things to divert children and obviously adults as well. Some drawing materials. Stop greenwashing. So greenwashing and fossil fuels. Stop greenwashing. That's what Shell is allowing. What the Science Museum is allowing Shell to do by accepting their money. They're making them look like they're sponsoring a really interesting and valid climate change exhibition, which, well, we've heard from scientists today how there are problems with the focus of the technological side of the solutions, but I mean, we value a debate about the climate and ecological emergency in museums, but Shell sponsoring this is absolutely removing any credibility of this as a public space where you can look at both sides equally or different sides equally. This is a fossil fuel funded exhibition, and it looks at carbon capture and storage, which is essentially an industry which is going to be taken over by fossil fuel companies because they use the same technologies and the same areas where they've taken oil out of the ground. They're going to pump the carbon dioxide back in there. So of course they're going to want to do carbon capture and storage because it's the exact same companies that are decommissioning their oil and gas fields that will now be able to do the carbon capture and storage. So we do not want the museum to do this anymore. It's absolutely immoral. So we're hearing more announcements asking us to leave. The staff are again asking us to leave, but it's not going to make any difference. A number of rebels here are going to be staying all night, and they're very determined for that. Let's see if we can talk to anybody about why they're staying here overnight. I was going to talk to some people over here before and we didn't get a chance, so hi there. I was wondering, I asked you if we could speak on the live stream before, but we weren't able to. Would now be a good time? Yeah, we'll come back. Perfect. Oh, maybe now isn't a good time. Lots of singing. So the museum staff becoming more vocal now, asking people to leave because the museum is closed, but we're saying show out.
Okay, welcome back. We are outside the Science Museum now. You've just seen rebels inside making a stand trying to tell the Science Museum, please, we do not want Shell to be investing in a museum that so holds itself on its science when it's not listening to the science, clearly by taking fossil fuels out of the ground. That's why behind you can see that there's a roadblock in place, a van over there, and also people standing here holding a sign that says Shell out of our museum, and this is an intervention. This is absolutely intervention, because what we're finding through these protests and through research and through the many resources that there are available online to talk about how polluting these companies are, they are completely riddled within all of our systems, both here at the museum, talking about science, within our governments, within our schools, and within our churches even. Now, you do not have to be a religious person to be part of Extinction Rebellion, but earlier today, Christians for Climate Action, or Christians for XR, was in St. Paul's Cathedral trying to make a stand, saying exactly the same as they are here: stop supporting the fossil fuel industry that is destroying everybody that we know and care about. And this should not happen in the church, as well as it shouldn't happen in a museum. So we're going to go over now to that protest, do a bit of a catch-up, and see what happened at St. Paul's.
Unity of direction. As humans, we have capacities like no other species on Earth, and now we have a challenge like no other to match. If we could harness 1/10 of our intellectual, creative and cooperative power...
Okay, here we are again in St. Paul's. It looks as though things have taken a turn for the worst. The church authorities asked the group to leave, and the group decided not to, and a couple of people have started to glue on. You can see up at the end there. So the church has done what the church estate would do in a circumstance like this. They've just called in the police, and it looks like we're all going to get arrested. So much for the compassion of the Church of England and their promise to relate our... Is that? What do you want? Yeah, thank you. Very much. You're going to have to arrest me as well, by the way. So these are the policemen trying to get everybody to move, but we're not moving.
If you do not move, we may have to leave you, alright?
So this is...
All the backpacks out of the way.
This is the Church of England's response to our request to divest from fossil fuels. And it's to send in the police, which is what you'd expect of a church of state.
So I'll ask one more time, is there anything I can reasonably do to save it to me? Yes, no? Yes.
Just come around the back here. So I just want to...
working? No, absolutely not. Most of my colleagues are working.
All right, then I can go around the front.
But we need an area where we can work.
Okay.
We've got people leaning over our shoulders.
All right, okay.
Unexpected action has taken place. I've
Right,
been told
okay.
that there is glue involved. I'd like you to continue filming, but please can you film some of my colleagues?
Yeah, okay. Sorry, I just want to get
I don't know why
you.
you're doing that. Can you take it out of my face, please?
Okay, well, you're standing over me and I'm at
I
steps.
actually asked you to go over there so my colleagues can work in a safe working environment. That involves you being over here.
Yeah, I just want to see whether any glue...
No, absolutely not. If you can come over here, please.
I'm being bullied here. I'm being bullied. Excuse me, I'm not interfering with anybody.
You are interfering.
That you have pressed over me on those steps,
I've asked you,
and I could hardly get out of the way. So I'm being bullied.
From going
Excuse
over
me,
there where it's safe.
Everybody, I'm being. But this is live.
I'm stopping you from going somewhere where my colleagues can work safely.
You can work safely. I'm fine.
I've no idea what it is that you are going to do or you're capable of. But please, could you step over there?
I'm just capable
so
of
we don't have to
videoing.
worry about what you're doing.
Okay, I'm stepping 2 steps away.
Thank you for doing that.
Whoa. Well, I think they're just going to arrest all of us. Those who are watching, could you please post this and share this? Hello there.
Mike, you've been asked to leave by staff of St Paul's, so my officers are going to escort you and ask you to leave now.
All right then, okay. Can I take my bag? I'm not gluing on anything, but can I have my bag? It's a dark grey, and I'm not. I'm going to get arrested like everybody else. Okay. I'm just going to sit with them because I'm one of them.
Not at the moment,
excuse me, Christian. Do I have to make that clear?
No,
I'm one of them.
That decision to arrest you.
Yeah, okay. But I'm going to go and sit down beside them.
Arrest you. No, you're not.
Well, I'll sit down here then until you do arrest
Where's
me.
your bag?
It's a light grey one, just over there, with a stick coming out the top.
Is that one there?
No, it's one with a selfie stick sticking out of it. Yeah, I'm not leaving though. I'm just staying with my friends.
Is that yours?
It is. Yeah, that's mine. Yeah, that's mine. Yeah. No, I'm not. I'm staying with my friends. No, I'm sorry.
You committed the offence of...
I haven't. I haven't committed any offence.
All right, the officers here, any use of force they're using is under...
Power to the rebels. Rebels conquer power. Tell me, can you hear it?
Stronger by the hour.
Stronger by the hour.
Power. Rebels.
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 Power. Power to the planet.
Power to the planet.
Power.
The planet from the power.
Tell me, can you hear it?
Tell me, can you hear it?
Stronger by the hour.
It's stronger by the hour. Power. Planet. Planet.
Ladies and gentlemen, can you please
So you can see in all the locations, the police are really moving in now. We can see in the location before us at St. Paul's that things might be coming to an end quite soon. I hope it's not the case here. We're not being violent in any shape or form. We're totally non-violent. That's what XR is about, non-violent direct action, and we're here to make a symbolic point about fossil fuel investment in a climate change solutions exhibition which is inherently biased, and we're protesting against Shell continuing to ruin our planet for future generations, for plants, for animals. It's just totally abhorrent what's happening, and we're in a corrode dreadful humanity. So we have to listen to the science, the Intergovernmental Panel on climate change. That's why we're here. There's some people, interestingly, moving in behind us. Not sure where they're coming from or where they're going there. I don't know whether those are XR rebels, but we don't really want to be here, actually, to be honest. I don't think any of us want to have our necks padlocked, bike locked to railings. We're here because we're scared and we're angry about climate change and the government's failure, in other words.
That represents management of this great scientific institution. We're here. We have asked you a question. And we're waiting for an answer. Why won't you kick Shell out of your museum? Why won't you kick Shell out of your museum?
So we're making a demand, actually. We're making a demand of the Science Museum. Well, we'd like it to be polite, actually. It's not a demand. You know, these are people, after all, who have families and needs just like us. We would like to have a conversation with the management of Shell Museum. There you go. That's kind of what it is at the moment. Sponsored by Shell. We want to talk to the Science Museum and ask them why they will not ditch their sponsor, Shell. Now, I know these scientists have been here all day, but I might see whether I can get an interview with one of them. They've been doing outreach all day. Oh, so difficult to get in and talk to people because there's so much chanting and singing. We want to keep spirits up, of course. And we're asking Shell to leave. Shell out, not us. Oh dear. Hello. Got a lady glued on here to the railings. Would you like to say anything to the live stream since we've reached a slightly quieter moment? Would you? Yeah. This is XR UK. Been live streaming for quite a few hours. So you've glued yourself on to this railing on the. Oh no. Oh, sorry. That's what I see what you mean. No, actually, that's very. Sorry, careless of me. That's very important to say. Yes. No. Good. So
I was a little girl. I love the Science Museum. I've got a BSc and a PhD. I'm a clinical psychologist. I also have 2 kids. My oldest child asked me the other day, Mum, what's a code red? I'm scared. And I said, it's okay, darling. None of this is new. This is stuff we've already known for a little bit. It's not a sudden new threat that we don't know about. And what I told her was that just like you can see in the Science Museum today, human beings are infinitely resourceful. When we speak, when we look and find out how things work, when we think about the truth, when we use science, we can understand things and we can solve problems, but we have to be honest. Science is about putting a theory out, checking if it works, and then keeping up, and then changing it and keeping on going. sadly, right now, the reason I'm here is because Shell isn't a scientific organisation. Shell has been promoting misinformation about the climate emergency for a very long time. Shell should not be a sponsor of this museum. We've asked the museum repeatedly, we've written to them, we've taken all manner of peaceful, non-troublesome means to try and ask them to reconsider their decision. But they've said no. They've said we just want Shell to keep on sponsoring our exhibition. And I don't know, it just breaks my heart that my children are going to have to, that they even have to worry about this stuff. I want to be able to tell them things are going to be okay, but I want it to be honest. I don't want to lie to them. Shell is lying to them in their exhibition, about what can be done. What we know is that we need to decrease the amount of CO2 going into the atmosphere. What we know is that we need to rewild. What we know is there are all kinds of things that already exist that can get us out of this problem, but the investment is not going into them. And when it's still going into fossil fuels and not into the solutions that we know already exist, my kids are at risk, and I love them, and I don't want that to happen, and that's why I'm here.
Very eloquently put. Thank you very much. I wanted to ask you, since you said that you love the Science Museum, how does it feel that, like some other people have mentioned just now, there's no response from them? They don't want to engage at all. What do you think that says about the Science Museum?
I think they're probably in a very difficult position, to be honest. If you look at the wider context of funding for science and the arts, I can understand why a museum would want to get any money that it can, so it can keep on doing what it does. I completely get that. I just think that if they want to stay a credible institution, they need to not accept money from a company that is spending, I think, 23 times as much income of its income on fossil fuel exploration and promotion as it is on any solutions to the problem that we're in now. So I can understand why they might want to do it, but it's the wrong thing to do.
It's not a novel thing we're asking them to do either, is it? There's actually a lot.
BP has been dropped by the National Portrait Gallery. There's, I'm a bit knackered, sorry, but I know.
I feel you.
I know that around the world, a lot of institutions have been dropping their fossil fuel sponsors. I think possibly the Olympics. I can't remember.
Royal Shakespeare Company has, and I think somebody told me today that British Museum had. I'm not sure that it has actually yet, but it will soon, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, there's just no place for fossil fuel sponsoring of our institutions, especially educational ones. As one of my children said to me, look, Mum, it's like cigarettes sponsoring a lung transplant unit. It's just not right. It's kind of a joke, and they're right. They're absolutely right.
And of course, tobacco advertising used to be huge, didn't it? And then, gradually it's now become a taboo. So the same could happen again, surely.
Exactly. And interestingly, of course, the tobacco industry and the fossil fuel industry use exactly the same methodologies. They, in fact, ExxonMobil.
Yeah, lobbying.
Yeah, they lobby. They both use the same. They actually both J.K. Rothmans, I think, and ExxonMobil both used the same PR company who set up essentially fake scientific institutions to spread misinformation, so that it was questionable whether there was a link between cancer and smoking, and so it was questionable whether there was a link between human activity and climate and ecological emergency. There's no doubt now. There's literally no doubt now. So now that sponsorship should stop.
Thank you so much. Is there anything else you'd like to say before I leave you to quite an uncomfortable night?
I wish I didn't have to do this. But I don't think there's anything more important to be doing right now.
So great to hear why you're here, and I think to show people who are watching that people who are putting themselves on the line, and like you yourselves, we're very principled people and very deeply thinking people, and we're doing this because we care. We're not,
It's all for love.
All for love. What a great note to end on. Thank you very much for your interview, and take care of yourself. Quite calm scenes now at the Science Museum as, well, I'm sure the police and the security will be back shortly, but they've realized that we're not going to be scared off. We're not going anywhere for a little while. So yes, I can either find some more interviews, or we might want to head back outside briefly and see whether people are hanging in there on the outside of the museum as well. Right, well, it looks like we are going to be maybe looking for a few more interviews in that case. Now things are quieting down, so let me just get up off the floor. And let's see. Actually, I have somebody I would quite like to talk to. Hi there. I've noticed that you're wearing a first aid vest, I believe. Would I be able to talk to you on the live stream for XR UK?
Yes.
Yeah, of course. I'll just
trying to find out what's going on
outside. I'll get back to our first aid rebel in a minute, because that's obviously going to be quite an important role as we come. We'll have a look at some of the signs here first. People writing some messages here. Yeah. So let's just have a quick look at this message. Welcome to the Orwell Science Museum, where exhibitions about our future are funded by companies who are destroying our planet and, destroying our future and present. Coming soon, exhibition on women's rights sponsored by the, well, I don't know about if we'll highlight that one in particular, but there are a lot of really, really raw feelings here about fossil fuel extraction and how that's funding something like the Science Museum, which we all see as such a great institution. Okay, our first aid rebel is ready. Hi there. I've seen you that's all right. I've seen you at quite a few things this week, and I just wanted to ask you about your role, really. What does your role do, and how does it help the rebels in Extinction Rebellion?
It's basically what we do is we do first aid, as it says. If somebody's hurt, we'll give them whatever they need to, plasters if they've cut their finger or something. We can deal with bigger things. We can deal with bigger incidents, but obviously we prefer not to. If somebody has a cardiac arrest, for example, we can deal with that. It's mainly though, it's things like we carry paracetamol and stuff like that. One rebellion I did, that was all I did, one lot of paracetamol in the whole week. So it's not always very exciting.
It's still good to have you here, though, because it's part of our movement, isn't it? That we're looking out for each other. We're all crew, and that we want to make sure that people are able to participate as well with different needs.
Absolutely. Well, I don't know if you know, but first aid is part of Action Wellbeing as well. So we're part of a larger group. So I still do some Action Wellbeing stuff as well. So I was giving out sweets this afternoon to kids who'd been giving out labels, for example, which is Action Wellbeing type thing. And I carry a big water bottle on the front sometimes.
Oh, brilliant. To top up people.
Yeah, it's like 15 litres, because you certainly like 15 kilos if you were carrying it. It just sticks on the front of the buggy, and it's quite useful.
Excellent. Oh yeah, I can see that. What a great way to kind of carry it around. And what's your personal motivation to be here today?
Flip it. I've got 2 teenage kids, and I want them to have a livable planet when they grow up. I really do. I mean, it's
not too much to ask, is it?
No, you do some reasonable things. Yeah, I mean, that's basically it. And I've known for an awful long time. I've been involved in Greenpeace since the 70s, sorry. And but there's a letter written by, I can't remember his name now, but he's one of the American presidential people from the turn of the century, worrying about the effect that coal was having on the environment. There's a letter which you can Google. And that,
you mean turn of the 21st century? No.
Turn of the 19th century. So 1898.
Okay, so the 20th century coming, yes.
Yes, yeah. It was a pretty.
Still quite a long time ago.
It is. But yeah, I love Greenpeace to bits. They've done some good things, but we've done a lot more. In the 2 years, we've done so much, and it's wonderful. And I was saying to somebody the other day, in 2016, the number of people who were seriously worried about global warming was about 3%. And now it's 2 years on, well, no, 4 years on, 5 years on. It's now 80% of the population are worried about it. I mean, it's amazing.
There's a lot more to do, isn't there? But we have I think we have contributed, I should say, to bringing climate change into a mainstream consciousness.
Yeah. It's true. It's true. And that's. I don't think we can do much more than that. I do think the tide's turning. I think the recent report made a huge difference. I think people really realised.
This is the Code Red for Humanity report by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change.
Absolutely, but there's been lots of stuff coming out which has been totally ignored. Stuff by the UN, and there was nothing in the papers hardly. The Guardian carries stuff, but nobody takes to notice the Guardian anymore because it's too. Anyhow, I don't know.
But we've made progress, haven't we? But we've only done that by taking non-direct action and putting our bodies on the line like we have today.
I'm arrested today, if it comes to it. I have been arrested before. We shut down Nova Harbour, which I was quite proud of. There were 10 of us, and 5 glued themselves across the A2, and we blocked the roundabout. And I was the oldest person there, which was amazing. Do you know John Lyons? You've come across John Lyons?
Do you know what? I have, yes. A few years ago now, yes. I was quite near him on Whitehall, yeah.
He's part of the local group I belong to in Hastings, and he's just phenomenal.
This is, for people who don't know, he is a, I think, 93-year-old rebel who's been arrested countless times through his. He's done so many. He fostered tons of children, and he's done amazing things.
Reports for the UN.
Okay, well that's a good one as well.
He was an observer in Palestine when the Palestine mandate broke down, so that's a long time ago. He's just, he got it. He sat down in Hastings and he got a little camping stool out, and he put it out on the road. He sat down on it. He got his flask. Took some flask, poured himself a cup of tea, surrounded by police at the time.
Yeah.
Who were trying to move him and just calmly sipped his tea. Yeah. It's just
some amazing people involved in this movement, aren't there? Actually, everybody has something to contribute. So I would say, and I think we probably haven't said that enough actually on this live stream because it's just been so full on this evening. But if you're inspired by what you're seeing, please share the live stream first. Get involved. So many ways to get involved. We've got 1 week left, don't we, of our rebellion?
We've got a week left. We've got some interesting stuff doing there. Tomorrow, I believe there's something a bit spicy, possibly. It's supposed to be quite a day tomorrow.
Well, mainly, I think what we're going to be doing tomorrow is there's some kind of you have to, if you check on Facebook. So this is going out on Extinction Rebellion Facebook. But it's going, if you check on their events, I think we've got some kind of tea party going on. So that's the main event tomorrow. But yeah.
Oh, okay. It's changed so much.
Yeah. We're going to go on to, I think we're going to move outside actually to take a little break. Thank you so much for joining us. Yeah, okay, take care. Right, so yes, I think we're just going to take a very brief look around at how everybody still is, and while I wait for us to transfer outside.
Okay, everyone, I believe that you're with me now, and we are outside the Science Museum, trying to make some noise, motivating the people inside, and motivating the people out here as well, who are still involved in civil disobedience, trying to make action happen on the climate crisis faster, and in line with the seriousness of the situation. As you can see behind us, there's a sign that says, "Imagine the impossible." This was supposed to be an impossible protest. It's happening. It's thought that not much can be done on the climate crisis, and that's definitely not the case. There is a lot that can be done. We have to imagine the impossible because it is hopefully possible still. So in order to talk about this a bit more, I've got this gentleman here and his elephant, very symbolically saying that this is the elephant in the room. Could you tell me a bit, could you first introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Steph from London.
Fantastic, thanks Steph from London. Now you don't usually carry your backpack on your front, but you've turned it around so that we can see this elephant in the room today. What is the elephant in the room you wanted to get attention on today?
The climate crisis. So one of my hobbies is playing frisbee on the beach, and I brought this to a European tournament. We're being moved on by the police.
Yeah, moving on. So we're just going to move in a bit. The police are just coming and pulling in now. And in the background you'll hear some speeches, some songs that people are trying to say to get some motivation going. Oh, I can't hear what they're saying. But we're going to keep going. So yes, what is the elephant in the room you wanted to talk about? You can go out to a corner. So we're just away from the music. Okay, we're going to go out to a corner to get away from the music. As nice as it is, it means that it's hard to hear people, and we want to hear what Steph and his elephant have to say. So let's head a bit further back this way, closer to the sign, imagine the impossible, and let's carry on. So talking about the elephant in the room for the third time, let me know what you wanted to say.
They're advancing again.
Okay. Should we stand on the side of the pavement? Maybe that's better. Yeah, let's stand over there. We'll find some space here. There we go. And then hopefully we won't get moved on for a bit. So, pretty fitting really that we're talking about the science when we've got one of the long-standing protesters at HS2 who's just walked past me there with his dog. Really important stuff going on over there. And yes, perfect time to talk about the elephant in the room, the climate crisis that seems to be so willfully ignored at the moment, and the extent of it especially. Okay, right, we're going to have to keep going through the noise. So, go on.
So, simply, it's the fact that people aren't talking about the climate crisis enough. As I said, one of my hobbies is playing frisbee on the beach, and it's a sport that just won't exist if we don't do something about climate change. So that's my action that I'm taking in my sports community. I try to convince people that in order to save our beaches, save our sports, all the activities that we love to do, we need to have a stable climate, and playing sport will be the least of our worries if we don't sort out the climate. Food shortages, obviously threats to our livelihoods, to our homes. So yeah, I'm just trying to give people simple actions that they can do. For example, changing their electricity provider, changing their bank to one that's more sustainable, voting green, things like that. Just try and spread the message.
And even if we did all of those things at a local level, I feel as though that change is still need to be, it won't make as big of an impact as it will if we can put pressure on people who have much more power than the everyday person. To what extent do you think actions like this are getting that attention and trying to push for that action? So we're talking about trying to get awareness out. It's more than awareness at this point. It's also about actually getting action happening.
Yes, my opinion is that it's a drip, drip, drip effect that we can have, and it's just slowly swaying basically the public opinion, and also just slowly putting more and more pressure on people in power that basically we're taking the moral high ground, and with for example, from the City of London, we're taking away their moral standing. We're trying to expose what they're doing, and once we take away their legitimacy, then they have no justification anymore for what they're doing other than profit, and it becomes obvious. And the more obvious it becomes, the harder it is to maintain. So I think XRs, we're on the right side of history. We're just trying to apply pressure where we can, doing what we can, occupying the streets. It's a small power that we have, but we're here showing that a lot of change needs to happen very, very quickly, and it's really urgent. And the urgency of the problem is reflected in the urgency of our actions, occupying the streets.
Now, we talk about the urgency, we talk about how important that is. We can see people getting arrested around us. I think a big part of this is trying to show that the impetus is there behind the people. The people want the change. When we talk about needing to make these changes by 2025, for some academics, they look at that and they think, you have no idea how drastic those changes are going to be. Those changes might not be in the best interest in the short term for some people. That might mean that some livelihoods have to end. That might mean that some some people have their lives very drastically changed, but ultimately the long term will lead to a prosperous planet for everyone, hopefully, to live on. One of the things that talked about a lot in these protests is about privilege. Not everybody is privileged enough to be here with us today, but there are definitely people that can do things from home. There's remote rebels and things, and that are really, really valuable. What would you say has been your experience? Would you say that you feel like these are engaging the people that need to be engaged? Is it getting attention?
Well, it's obviously been in national media, and so it is getting attention. You know, I've seen Channel 4, BBC, etc.
Go away from me!
Sorry, distracted. So I think it's, you know, we have a certain amount of national media coverage, but I think it's also up to every individual to try to, you know, spread the word with their circle of friends, their family, but also do things like, you know, the digital online rebellion you mentioned, phone calling to different companies that are, you know, polluting heavily or investing in fossil fuels. So, you know, we can only do what we can. When it comes to next elections, those who can vote. That would make a difference if you voted Green, for example, showing, you know, that you really want urgent action. But yeah, we can only try our very best and try to speak to as many people as possible, and, you know, write to your MP, do all the other things that we've been doing as well.
And I think as well, a really great time to talk about from that is how much bigger this situation is than the streets of London. Obviously, here in London, we've got so many problems where politicians that are living here, that are spending most of their time here, are involved in not changing or not turning the system round. As you can hear, the song singing behind me is talking about climate justice right now and how we need to turn the situation around. When we hear about the situations going around the world, let's just put some perspective in there. There's wildfires currently going in Greece and Turkey, no doubt soon to be in Australia as well. Algeria and California currently have really bad wildfires. Droughts are happening in Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq and Pakistan. The Czech Republic and Montreal have deadly tornadoes. Sri Lanka, Mexico, Bhutan and Nepal have experienced flash flooding and landslides. This really is urgent. To echo what you said, this is so urgent. For anybody who hasn't quite grasped that yet is a bit reserved. Doesn't really. This is lovely listening to this music in the background, isn't it? Just a subtle song for the planet. What would you say to anybody who is a bit nervous, doesn't really know what to do, is really listening to all of this information and thinking, well, there is no hope. What's the point?
Well, I would say two things. One is we are in this country privileged because we're one of the most emitting countries, but we're also going to be among the least affected, or at least will be affected, you know, last in line to be affected. So we have an opportunity. Also, the opportunity we have a police force that is also relatively non-violent. You know, we're not being oppressed, so we have the possibility to come out and protest. So, you know, you can show solidarity with people in the developing world who will bear the brunt of climate, who are already bearing the brunt of climate change now. You know, Turkey's not far away from the UK, relatively speaking, and you know, it's really getting closer and closer. Germany and Belgium had terrible floods. Hundreds of people lost their lives. You know, so, you know, what can we do about it? Well, my personal opinion is it's a matter of conscience. It's a matter of, you know, what do you stand for? What are your beliefs? You know, what's the right thing to do in this situation? Do you just, you know, accept that we're on a path to extinction? That, you know, species are going extinct every day. That the children's quality of life will get worse with every generation. Is that something you're happy to just accept lying down, or do you want to come and lie down in a street and show that you don't accept that? That, you know, you're doing everything in your power. Maybe if your power is to sit in the street, then you claim that power. If your power is to come and shout, if you can't sit in the street, maybe you'll come and shout or support or drum or write or do something, but just show that you haven't given up. And, you know, we need to imagine the impossible. I think the title of this protest is so perfect because it seems impossible to turn the situation around. But if you don't believe, or if you don't at least try, you know, it's a very bleak life, you know, it's just the alternative is so bleak and so depressing that, you know, you can draw strength from at least trying. So that's what I would say. Just try your best, everyone.
Thank you so much, Steph. That was really powerful to hear. Thank you. I'll let you get on with your elephant now and put your backpack the right way round. Well, you heard it here, everyone. That was really quite powerful thing to listen to. We're going to leave you in a moment, but this protest is by no means over. Please come and join the rebellion over the next week or so. We do also have lots of incredible access to outreach. A lot of different people are trying to fight for climate action. If Extinction Rebellion doesn't seem like the one for you, you can always look for Greenpeace, the Guardians of the Forest, Amazon Watch. All of these people are doing really, really important things. We're going to hear in a moment from one person that used to work for Friends of the Earth. Her name is Sheila. Before we do that, though, I just want to remind us here watching why we're here. We're here because we're in between two key dates at the moment. We've known about the climate crisis for over 30 years, much more than that actually. Feel free to pop in the comments the exact dates so that we can really understand the gravity of how long we've gone not acting on the science. We're outside the Science Museum, which is never more telling to put emphasis on that. We need to act on the science. As I said, we're in between two key dates. 2 weeks ago, the United Nations IPCC report was announced, and the report confirms what so many were already aware of, and that is that the human activity on this planet is changing the climate in unprecedented and sometimes irreversible ways. It has raised yet another alarm, warning that increasingly extreme heat waves, droughts and flooding are expected as a result, and that a key temperature and that key temperatures are likely to be shifted in just over a decade, and the consequence of that is enormous and is currently enormous for so many people. It has literally been called a code red for humanity by the UN chief. If the UN chief is going to say that, and we already know that this report is much more reserved than it should be, according to people who have worked on the report, and we really should be worried. We don't need to be worried to the point where it's just doom and gloom. Scientists say that this can be avoided. Scientists say the worst of this can be avoided anyway. Some of it is unrepairable, but there's a lot that still can be done if we do make sure that our governments are held to account and make sure deep cuts in emissions of greenhouse gases happen to stabilise rising temperatures. Coming up, we've got the COP26. What does that mean? That's Conference of the Parties. And that's really one of our last chances of turning this around. So if you're sat at home and you're not sure what to do, there's so much that can be done. You can join some of those protest movements we talked about before, some of those action groups. Your skills are needed no matter where you are. We're right now, if you want to come join us, see it for yourself. You don't have to get arrested. You can just come and see what's happening. We are on Cromwell Road outside the Science Museum. Come and have a look, chat to some people. There's scientists, doctors, families, friends here that want to come and say hello. And would happily talk to you about what's happening. They're normal people just like you and I, and they care and they want to make something happen. Something needs to change. You can also be a remote rebel if getting here is not possible. Remote rebels are on force at the moment, calling Europe's most polluting bank, Barclays, and trying to clog their lines and make sure that if they're not aware already, taking fossil fuels out of the ground and subsidising or investing so heavily in fossil fuels is not acceptable. It's not helping, and they know that. They know that. Then we also have, as well as remote rebels, we have lots of blockades going on across HS2 lines. So if you live in a HS2 area, the high-speed railway that's decimating forests and wildlife all around us, things that we care about and cherish so much, you can absolutely get involved and join in one of those protests. I'm sure if you're watching now and you do know the statistics, please pop them in the comments so people can understand just how devastating this project that they're funding over £7,000 of their own taxpayer money into, if they are a taxpayer. And I think that would shock a lot of people. If you have anything to say, anything to add, please add them into comments. We want to make sure that this conversation grows and that we can share and talk to everyone and build a community that can take action. If you can share this video with 5 people, that would be really helpful. We want to talk outside of our echo chamber And for now, we're going to, though this action still continues, we are going to hear from Sheila, an interview that we did earlier before she had to nip off. She's a former employee of Friends of the Earth, one of those groups that we really do respect in this country. Definitely worth listening to what she has to say. And come and speak to people yourself if you'd like to. We're going to leave you with this blockade outside the Science Museum. There's definitely still people inside, locked on. They've got necks tied to fences, trying to say, no, look, we need to pay attention. The Science Museum needs to divest, needs to not be tied up with Shell, one of the world's most polluting companies that's known about the consequences of the climate crisis and the consequences of their actions on exacerbating the climate crisis for long enough. They're there now. We're here outside. There's a space for everyone. Come and join. We need to make change. We need to make change happen now. So we're going to leave you with the subtle singing of people here and this man standing still on top of a lorry blocking the road as a ladder goes up, about to probably take him down, amongst signs of make the impossible happen. The impossible is possible. This is the impossible rebellion. But this action, scientists have said, we're listening to the science. We're outside the Science Museum. The science speaks and says that, yes, we're in an awful situation, but we can change things. Thanks very much for watching, and tune in over the rest of the rebellion.
Go.
Okay, so outside the Science Museum now, people are still staying strong in front of this enormous truck here that's holding the space, trying to make sure that we can stay for as long as possible so that we can make sure people like you can see what's happening. You can see music is starting. This is to get people motivated to stay here as long as possible. And with me, I've got someone to really help the motivation a bit more. This is Sheila. Sheila was telling me earlier how she's been involved in protests for a really long time. Is that right, Sheila?
Yes, so about 30 years, I suppose.
And in that time, I think it's really important. You've learned a lot, you've seen a lot. For some people watching this, they'll be like, you're wasting your time, what are you doing? You're wasting your time. Is it a waste of time based on your experience of how protest helps change things?
Absolutely not wasting time. It may not have an immediate effect on that day, of course, unless it's something like saving a tree or something, but something like this is not going to have a huge effect today, but it's going to encourage people, not just the people who are here today, which is hundreds of people, but also all the people read about it in the news, the books are written, articles are written, government ministers hear about it, companies hear about it, and it filters into the whole society. So it isn't only just blocking a road and that's the end of it. That's sort of the focal point, but that's just the beginning.
That's brilliant, and I know, Sheila, we're getting Sheila to talk to us now, but you're about to go and pick up someone from a train, so she's got to go. I just have one more question for you, and that is for anyone watching who's a bit nervous and doesn't really necessarily feel like this is their place for them. Where would you recommend they go? What would you recommend they do?
Well, I've been in lots and lots of protests, and I've been arrested a couple of times, but only when I knew I was going to get arrested. If you're worried about getting arrested, there's almost no chance you will be if you just want, help. And 99% of people aren't arrested or injured or anything like that. There are lots of things you can do. You can come out on the street, pass out leaflets, provide food, have a children's area. You can also, you can even do things behind the scenes, things on the internet and assign positions and work behind the scenes to, get some of these actions going. So it isn't all, climbing trees, getting arrested, being dragged off. That looks good on publicity, it looks good on television, but that's not the majority of people. I mean, they're really brave people, and that's great they are doing that. That's a major part of it. But that's only about 2%. The rest of us are not likely to have that happening to us. And you're safe. And come on out, and if you're worried about it, just come out and stand around and look and watch and see what it's like. See what kind of people we are, what the messages are, and what things you might be able to help, or just watch. And the more people, the better.
Thank you so much, Sheila. I'll let you go get an actual person from the train now. Thank you. And just as Sheila goes now, I just want to point out that it did go red just behind her with the traffic lights. It's green now. But I think that works well to remind us that this is code red for humanity as we know it. So please, if you're thinking about getting involved, do back to the protest live.